Their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please. I request everybody who is standing inside the hall to please take their seats as we now delve into the panel, and I would request our chair and moderator, Dr. Ashok Kumar, Deputy Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, to please join us up on the stage. Welcome to you, sir. Ms. Yashika Malik, Climate Change Specialist from World Bank. Ma'am, can I request you to kindly join us here on the stage? Ladies and gentlemen, with a big round of applause, let's welcome the lady here. And you're looking very gorgeous in the sari. Must I compliment you for that? Mr. Madhur Jain, CEO, Varaha. Welcome to you. Mr. Swapna Mehra, CEO, Iora Ecological Solutions. Mr. Yashodhan Ramteke, CEO, EcoGuard Global. Welcome to all the panelists. We are really looking forward to hear your insights. So over to you, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you. I think after such a wonderful spiritual discourse with the saint himself here in person, I think many of us have the experience of just watching his videos, but being in person is another experience. So we will climb down from that spiritual high, and we are now landing to the ground where we would again go back to our daily roads of markets and other discussions. So I am Dr. Ashok Kumar, working as a Deputy Director General at Bureau of Energy Efficiency. We have a privilege of distinguished panelists here. So I will introduce first in a very brief, but I have a longer version of their introduction which goes in pages. So in the interest of time, I will not get into that adventure. But briefly, I will just introduce. But before that, the context in which we are here, many of the discussions that we already had. So this is a discussion which is primarily focused, very relevant to Indian context. So we would be looking at the possibility of engaging you can say, the backbone of Indian economy, the farmers, because India is an agrarian country, and the agriculture contributes for about 16, 17, 18% to the GDP. And half of the employment that this sector gives to the country. So this is a very important, and in the emerging carbon market, this set of, or the sector of the economy should not be left behind. We should certainly have the, know-how to how to leverage this market for the benefit of the last mile farmer who is sitting at the very end of the far corners of the country. And I myself, being a farmer's son, the subject is very close to me, and still I have family members who are still engaged in a very smaller level of farming. So these are very important activities, interventions that are going to come up in the future course of time that are emerging in this carbon market. So we will have, from the distinguished panelists here, we will try to discuss all aspects possibly, if not to the limited time that we have. But I will just go very briefly to the panelists here. First, we have Ms. Yashika Malik. Yashika Malik is a climate change specialist at the World Bank and focusing on climate policy, finance, modeling, with over a decade of experience in policy advocacy, stakeholder engagement, and the development in innovative financial instruments. She works to support climate resilient development and informed decision making. So this is I have picked a very small portion of her credentials, so she has many more. So as we'll take her experience and expertise to learn. And then we have Mr. Madhur Jain. He's the CEO and co-founder of Baraha. He is viral for the selling, I think, biochar to Google and other multinationals. So he's very famous. So he has different, credentials of working in the modeling, carbon markets, work in the smallholder farmers. And he has consumers ranging from, as I was mentioning, Google, Microsoft, Lufthansa, Swiss RE, and several other large companies. We also have Mr. Sapan Mehra. Sapan is a founder, CEO of the IORA Ecological Solutions, one of the leading developers of the integrated nature-based climate solutions for conservation and restoration of landscape and building community resilience. And finally, we have Mr. Yashodan Ramteke. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, who is the CEO of the EcoGuard Global, one of the largest technology providers in the carbon market space. He brings over a decades of hands-on experience on the carbon market design, digital MRV systems, circular economy frameworks, and the policy-aligned climate markets mechanisms. So this is a very, very short introduction. So for the panelists, please, we have very compressed timeline. For each question that we have framed, I'm given very structured question to ask and a very strict timeline. So you would get the first round, 3 to 4 minutes for your intervention along with the question that it will be thrown to you. And then we will get, if time permits, we will go to the second round. So the first question, I will come to Ms. Yashika, the World Bank specialist. So as you know, carbon credit trading scheme in India is still, we are at a formative stage. We have done quite a bit of groundwork. Then several of the actions are there, participants have been identified. But still from a global policy standpoint, what features of international carbon market framework, this result-based financing, aggregated smallholders, because the agriculturists would be smaller participants. Do you believe India should adopt to ensure low transaction cost and inclusive farmer participation? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ashokji. And this is also a very personal agenda for me because I'm also a granddaughter of a farmer. So I've seen it since my childhood, things evolve on farm. And then lucky enough to be working with, organizations, whether it's within India or the World Bank, understanding how policy and that sort of connect with the farmer develops. And internationally, this is not only limited to, say, India, but globally, what we've been seeing is that generally the market-related conversations are limited to technical experts, and it is designed by technical experts, implemented by technical expert. Most of the processes are generally, with technical expert, and there is where we feel there is a bit of disconnect. That small farm holders are not in the picture of this. And that's what we've been also trying through our World Bank operations, trying to change. Now, to scale up adoption of climate smart practices, climate resilient practices, and scale up the mitigation benefits to farmers, there are few things that are extremely critical, and from a carbon markets perspective. One is aggregation. As you mentioned, the farm holdings are extremely small. So it would make an economic case to bring all of them together. And many countries, including India, have done great work on, say, farmer-producer organizations that can be leveraged. The second thing that the challenge that we face and we need to overcome that is MRV. Generally, MRV costs are higher. It's difficult because the farmers have limited capacity to understand the whole process. They know what to sow, when to sow, how to cut it, all of that. But how does it link to the whole process, methodology? That's something, that is extremely challenging. So can we equip them with some digital solutions where it's all automated, right? They don't have to, they're part of the process at the design itself, but after that, everything is sort of taken care by. So digital MRV is second thing that, we have panelists that will probably talk about it, is integral for the success of carbon markets in agriculture sector to bring farmers on board. And third, the important thing is the role of private sector players. They have to come on board not just as a buyer, but throughout the chain, the value chains of it. And there are some good examples globally as well, which where they've invested in the value chains and on carbon outcomes as well, and that has, helped farmer gain confidence around those issues. And benefit sharing, I think that is extremely critical. The system needs to be transparent. Generally what happens is, because it's a bit of a technical issue, the farmers are they share carbon contracts which might not be transparent. They don't understand the other players in the market. So that benefit sharing mechanism has to be transparent, and the maximum benefit needs to be given to farmers back, because they are the ones that are actually implementing these things on ground. So I'll probably stop that and take it in the second round.
Thank you. I think very clear, the World Bank's, your experience, exposure to the global market, the help of digital and facilitating the last mile. I think the farmers through the technology can, possibly be able to transfer the benefit to the maximum. I think, thank you for sharing that. So next I will go to Mr. Jain for the, so Varaha has pioneered, digital MRV tools in agriculture. So our question would be, how can the emerging technologies like AI and other support technologies, maybe mobile-based or something which is familiar to the farmer community, so they can be leveraged to, as Yashika told, in the digital MRV, how that can help to bring the, simplify the project, kind of a whole ecosystem, the project making, and to build trust among the farmers. Again, with they do not have much of information, how to build that trust and get their confidence and then their involvement. So, floor is yours, please.
No, thank you, sir. So, sir, I mean, as Yashika also mentioned rightly, so that like the process of carbon credit issuances and the methodologies, it's so complex that individual farmers can't really participate directly. And also it's not going to work out economically as well. And hence, there is a need for an intermediary, which is often called a project developer, as an entity one of their jobs is to actually integrate, aggregate tens of thousands of smallholders farmers together so that it actually becomes a viable project wherein enough credits are being produced, which creates incentive for a large buyer to come in and due diligence the project because then they can get proceeds in the form of carbon credits over a long period of time. So you need to have a meaty enough project with enough farmers aggregated into it. Now, if you are aggregating tens of thousands of farmers together in a single project, how do you really validate that a certain event is taking place on their farm and how much carbon is actually being sequestered, which can then be created into carbon credits? So one is that you hire thousands of people who go to farm, take pictures when these events are taking place, which then becomes even more expensive and almost unmanageable because principal agent problem comes into being. And hence, this is where digital MRV can actually create a lot of trust and integrity into the system so that smallholder farmers can actually participate into these markets. So for example, in a soil carbon project, we take example of rather than crop residue burning, a farmer claims that I am using happy seeder to cut the residue and mix it with the soil, right? Suppose 5,000 farmers claim that in your project. How do you really validate? So this is where mobile apps help you onboard farmers onto the platform, that this is their farm, these are their land records, this is the agreement which has been signed with them. So that's mobile app. But how do you really validate? So this is where remote sensing based modeling, data collection, scientific rigor come into place, wherein you are able to validate that rather than burning, they actually integrated and mulched the residue back into their farm itself, which is the validation part. And then the third part is quantification. So if you have to quantify that because of a certain event, how much carbon actually was removed, you need to create high fidelity scientific data working along with research institutions, which allows you to then really put a number that how much soil carbon increase happened because of a certain practice. Now, all of this are three different platforms in itself for a project to work for smallholder farmers at the scale that I mentioned earlier. All of these three modules needs to come together under a single technical infrastructure, which is also can easily be diligenced by a buyer and can also be understood by a VBB and the registry to be able to issue credits. So this is what Varaha has been able to build, which allows these large market players to actually build trust onto the credits coming from these farming lands. Yeah, I'll take a pause here.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Thanks. I think you being the pioneer in this area, so very well said that the technology can help in the aggregation. And I was, yesterday itself, I was talking to one of your colleagues, and he mentioned that in some cases, the testing cost itself is around 25 to 30%. So, you certainly need some level of transaction cost reduction strategy. So I think with the intervention of technology and other, IT-related activities that can, I think, substantially reduce that, and then coupled with the aggregation and other support, I think that's good. So thank you for that. Now I'll come to Mr. Yashodhan. So from an investor, and no, I will first go to, I think, I will go to Swapan Maharaj. I think I skipped, my apologies. The question to you is, in designing agricultural-based carbon projects, how can you, or how can the interventions such as the agroforestry, forest, soil carbon management, or water conservation, this strengthening of local ecosystem without altering the ecology, especially in a kind of a sensitive, ecological sensitive landscape. So your thought on that?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, firstly, very much for having me on this panel, and also delighted that agriculture and smallholder farming are part of the narrative on the founding of the Indian carbon credit trading system, and that we are looking at these sectors very prominently, which is critical. I think we have an opportunity here very critically to really reframe carbon markets for agriculture, not only as a climate finance solution, but also as a agriculture income driver. And I think if we do things properly, there is definitely something that can be done there. From our experience of 15 years in developing integrated landscape conservation and restoration programs that combine forest conservation, restoration, agriculture, soil carbon, and agroforestry, I think there are some lessons that we've learned. Also, we've been working on taking a lot of our aggregated landscapes to market, and we've realized that for farmers, the key question is that, will this activity reduce my risk and increase my income? Will I get paid on time? Is there predictability of my revenue? And can I trust the system, and can I trust the agencies implementing this system? I think that the real bottlenecks, in addition to technology and in addition to policy, are hence aggregation, trust, and predictability of cash flows. So that's sort of my overall thought here. When it comes to biodiversity and ecosystem conservation, I think these are very, very critical points to be considered. I think globally we've seen a number of case studies and examples now where sort of a carbon tunnel vision, where you've implemented agroforestry with species which are the fastest growing or give you the highest carbon yields in a certain period of time, or if you're implementing interventions in which you've not analyzed the soil health profile and the needs of soil health of the farmers, lead to carbon deserts, or can lead to carbon deserts where you have a lot of carbon issuance but the overall ecosystem is declining. I think there are a few problems here. I mean, problems are that you are firstly compromising on your broad ecological goals. But the second issue also is that the farmer that you are addressing these interventions to, who has to face the wrath of climate change, has resilience challenges, has income challenges, is now being tasked to carry out an activity to deliver a commodity which, if not syncing with their long-term goals, becomes a major, major threat to their subsistence. So how do we not allow for this to happen? There are three principles that we followed, which have held us at least in good stead in this direction. The first is that whenever we go ahead with an intervention on agriculture, it has to be designed at a landscape level, not at a farm level. You can't plan at a farm level. You should not initially start with farm level economics. You should start with landscape level economics. What is the interaction and play between different ecosystem services in the landscapes? What is the interplay between farmers across their fields? Small examples, such as if you grow trees across the boundary of a certain farmer of only a certain kind, which have very large canopy, it affects the yield not only on their farm, but also on the farm of their neighbor. Small things like that. If you grow trees which are not nitrogen fixing and which don't have good prevention of soil runoff capabilities, it affects the whole landscape negatively. So firstly, look at the whole landscape and the goals of the landscape. Is this landscape vulnerable to water runoff? Is this landscape vulnerable to soil health decline? Accordingly, plan your intervention. Species sovereignty needs to be given to the farmers. You know, whenever we go into a new landscape, we actually start with the species choice for agroforestry based on what a traditional farmer would do. And on top of that, then we add layers of resilience, of water conservation, and then carbon. So we need to have species selection which is rooted in ecology and then adapted to carbon curves and not the other way around. The third is we need to integrate ecosystem services. You know, we call this stacking of ecosystem services. We need to look at water, biomass, and soil integrated as a delivery to farmers where carbon becomes an outcome, not the only objective. We cannot plan for carbon as an objective. Lastly, it's important to keep in mind that the farmers are taking an ultimate risk by adopting a system that we are providing to them, because we are not assuming tenurial rights, especially in the case of India. You know, in many countries, carbon developers buy out the land. But in our case, we are actually taking tenurial permission from farmers. So the risk, if at all, if we are designing a system which puts long-term resilience at risk, it's actually an imminent risk to farmers of survival itself. So we have to keep that in mind when we design these systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mehra. I think very, very comprehensive approach. I think that is the way, I think for a country like ours, we cannot cannot afford any mistake on the way to develop. And I think the way landscaping and the overall ecosystem services all has to be kind of figured, or has to be accounted in the whole system of any carbon-related project that it's going to come. So I think the framework that you are mentioning is excellent. Thank you for sharing here. So now I'll go to the money person in this, from an investor and from a project developer's perspective. What are the biggest risks? I think some of the things have already popped up, so you need to respond to. The risk currently, which is perceived, particularly in the context of agriculture in large, as a general, but in the specific to our context, in Indian context, And then what could be the de-risking, mechanisms that can support us? So if you could share your thoughts, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you,
Floor is
Ashokji.
yours.
Thank you for the question. So as problems, when it comes from an investor perspective or a co-developer perspective, we see three main challenges to it. The first is the policy clarity. The policy has to be very clear when we are investing in any projects when we look at it. The second is the scalability of MRV in specifically agriculture kind of a systems. And the third is the revenue ROI, where we will get the ROI from and whether it be very volatile. The first is policy clarity. I am very happy to say that yesterday we launched the Indian carbon market. So we are moving in the right direction where at least there is a policy now in place where as investors we can look at it. We basically, EcoGuard comes from the Hedera ecosystem. Hedera is one of the world's largest blockchain DLT based systems, and we are investing a lot in the carbon market since a very long time to make DMRVs and this. Recently with EcoGuard, we are also looking at investing in carbon markets ourselves. So I'll just give you an example of how these challenges which we solved in Philippines with all these three things. What happened in Philippines is we are working with a confederation of farmers that is called as CONFED. So that is a confederation of coconut farmers in Philippines. There are 3.5 million farmers who are part of that ecosystem. And we are doing 3 programs based on the nature-based systems with them. There, what we have done is, because as we know, the MRV is very difficult and we need some aggregator. So CONFED is the body which is aggregating this whole 3.5 million farmers. The second problem when it comes to, again, MRV is you need to have right systems which you can trust on. So again, as coming from the DLT or the blockchain systems, we have set up systems which will bring trust in the whole system. And we are working very closely with the Department of Science and Technology in Philippines. What Department of Science and Technology is doing for us is there is a program called as Copernicus Philippines. Copernicus is a US-based, is a EU-based satellite system. So we are doing 3 levels of MRV with them. So we are doing an on-ground MRV where we are directly working with farmers, giving them the mobile apps where they will put their data. Second is we are using drones there. And the third is we are using this Copernicus Philippines, which is given the data by them. So that is how we are solving the MRV problem for it. And the third is the revenue ROI. One good thing which we saw in Philippines is the flow sector is part of NDCs. The NDC 2.0, which was there in Philippines, had the agriculture sector, but not the flow sector. But now what they had realized was their cost of abatement in the NDC 2.0 was nearly $75 per credit. Now, by including a flow sector in their NDC 3.0, that is coming down to $40, which becomes very competitive in the whole Article 6 market. So these kind of interventions will definitely give some kind of ease and comfort to investors and co-developers like us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think finally, all interventions, I think it leads to action through the money that it will flow. I think it is excellent that we are kind of in a place where we can see the way through this process where maybe, some modification in the current methods of financing, blended finance or any other. So we are, thank you, Mr. Yashodhan, for this intervention. So we are through with the first round of questions. So we'll go to the next round. Again, the same kind of leverage that maybe 3 to 4 minutes. Again, coming back to Ms. Yashika for the second round of questions. So the question for you is that, again, the farming community itself is very fragmented, small land holding in India. We have farmers are large in number, their land holdings are in a different pattern, and the size is small. In that context, fragmented land holding and weak institutional infrastructure often, limit this the farmers to access to the benefits that we are looking at because of their own weaknesses. So, again, from the World Bank's experience, what governance reforms, you would like to, or incentive mechanism can help create transparent, farmer-centric benefit-sharing systems in Indian carbon market?
Thank you, Ashokji, and it's an important question. And I would want to answer it on 2 points. Number one is what we've been seeing that it's a missed opportunity that generally the carbon finance programs are parallelly sort of created than the government programs on agriculture. And this is something that we've seen globally as well, where it is fragmented, not built together. There are challenges, and what it does, it shrinks the participation of farmers because, say, agricultural program focus more towards development, towards other issues that were highlighted, and carbon programs are more technical, which I alluded earlier as well. So we see that there's some mostly disconnect between the two. So one way to go forward would be that we bridge this gap and we leverage the government programs on agriculture and make them more sensitive to, say, carbon projects, or integrate the carbon project elements into government programs. So you don't need, so what would happen is you would be able to leverage the pipes that have already been built by the government for the same objective. And that also sort of brings in, say, more trust, more integrity, more transparency. So that is point number one, that the government programs need, and we've seen a lot of success in other countries. To give a few examples, like in Vietnam, we all talk about carbon markets or carbon credits in Vietnam. The alternate wetting and drying of rice was through an extension service. It was not a separate carbon project, right? And similarly, in West Africa, the climate resilience seeds program was through agricultural productivity project, not through a separate carbon program. So what we'll have to do is, when we sort of think about the agricultural issues, when we think about the agricultural solutions to those issues, there are several benefits, and those benefits could be mitigation benefits, right? So how do we capture those mitigation benefits or co-benefits within our agricultural program is going to be extremely important, and maybe the CCTS also provides a way forward because we'll be including agricultural carbon offset mechanism here as well. And the second important point, which I also mentioned earlier, is private sector participation. You know, we all talk about, okay, it's great, we can generate so much of carbon credit, but who's going to buy it? And then we look at private sector, that, generally private sector is bought into the conversation for or as a buyer of carbon credit. But we feel that it is important for the private sector to be part of the whole value chain. And through the AgriGanet program that we have at the World Bank globally, what we are doing is helping a government, helping the private sector integrate the whole value chain, system, and helping them understand what are the carbon outcomes and how they can participate throughout. So they can play a part as an aggregator, they can play a part on digital MRV, they can play a part on other things of this whole carbon value chains, as we would call it. And then there is more ownership from their side. The more benefits can be passed on to the farmers. So their role is critical, not just as a buyer, but throughout the value chains. So this has been our experience, and this would be critical for success of agriculture-related carbon credits in India as well.
Thank you. I think this is excellent that, for instance, if I share the PAT scheme's success, in a sense, the participation and their involvement, I think this is an excellent way to approach, in our case, that we make the beneficiary or the participant, private, public, all put together, and then finally designing a system of mechanism which can be trustworthy for investors, see less risk in that, government involvement, all that. I think excellent. Thank you for the intervention and and the experience of Vietnam. It kind of supplements, it supports that working of such a mechanism. So now I come to Mr. Jain for, given that again, we recognize that as we move down to agricultural field, the MRV is very complex. and as complex has its cost. So the complexity in cost certainly a barrier for small participants carbon projects. So how to navigate, if you could, throw your thoughts that given the landscape of complexity, facing and anticipating how it would. So how would be our roadmap for moving forward so that, we achieve what the desired goals are? So your thoughts.
Thank you, sir, for the question. So I think the investment in MRV, more importantly, needs to be looked at from the perspective of scalability, as well as being relevant for high quality buyers, right? So in my view, MRV definitely is expensive when you are building it out, like it requires investments in high quality, talent dense teams of scientists, tech architects, coders, etc. Then it also requires huge amount of investment in sort of setting up investment for infrastructure for measuring gaseous emissions, soil carbon under different cropping systems, different areas and regions that you are operating in, right? So it runs into several millions of dollars for each cropping system, right? But it enables you to build models which then allows you to scale to hundreds of thousands of farmers as well. So without this basic infrastructure of MRV-based investments for data and tech, you can't really scale these projects in a high-quality manner. So I think it's table stakes that we have it in place. Secondly, if you are able to get there, then it opens up like a huge opportunity to tackle and work with Fortune 5 buyers such as Google, Microsoft. In addition to that, Varaha works with large airlines such as Lufthansa as well. Like we are the only company in Asia who work with these buyers. And one of the reasons that we've been able to unlock is because of the quality of MRV which is underlying the projects that we run, right? And so suppose on a per hectare level, your MRV costs $5.50, but if your ARR credit sells for $80 instead of a standard $20 to $30, you have more than made up for the money that you have invested. And if farmer gets 40% of it, then the share which reaches their pocket is even much more higher than the MRV investment. So I think it's critical to look at it from the perspective of that you can't scale these projects, you can't gather the attention of high quality buyers, and you can't put enough money into the pockets of both project developers and farmers unless you have these infrastructures built out. So I think for Indian carbon market to succeed and actually bring foreign capital into our pockets in huge volumes given our capabilities and resources that we have at our disposal, we need to have very strong MRV foundations to not be able to sell these credits for cheap then afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, it is indeed a pleasure for the country that we have, such an entity who is able to sell these carbon credits to the giants of the people like Google's and Lufthansa. So that itself shows that whatever the credit that you are creating, that is worth the investment that they are making. And we very well understand, we will very well get benefit of being you in India, Bara in India, to get the agricultural community here to the benefit of the, you can say, trust and the strength that you already have developed. And hope we, in the coming times, you would be much more contributing in the agricultural area for the, the farmers, particularly for the small and fragmented, you can say, and the fringes of our country. So thank you for that. And I think now I'll go to Mr. Mehra for, I think he has, in the context, he said that, you need to take a very large ecosystem-based approach. So our question is that all these nature-based projects or nature-based solutions in the carbon area requires long-term commitment, as you have already said. You are there for some time, but then still the contracts and the commitments are very long time because the projects are like that, nature of the projects. So based on, your experience, what models of community engagement, so how you engage, how you build trust, keep the relations, and the monitoring that you do, that for at least, to keep the farmers' interests sustained in the project, and consequently they get finally the benefits. So would your thought on that?
Thank you very much. So, from our perspective, farmer engagement and participation is not purely a technical or technology problem. It's majorly a behavioral and institutional problem. You know, carbon projects are likely to fail when they take a purely project cash flow view only. They'll succeed when they're community-owned cash flow systems. That's our view. So there are, I would say, 4 drivers of engaging farmers. First is co-creation of project design. And deep engagement, co-creation and deep engagement, for which there is no replacement. And deep engagement not only at the very beginning, but throughout the life of the project. In one of our key landscapes in Meghalaya, where we have a ARR project, which is now about 28,000 hectares, from where we've done our first issuances. We've sold our issuances also at a $40 to $50 range to international buyers. And we've done India's first carbon-backed debt with Rabobank, which is a leading investor in that space. It took us a year and 642 community consultations to design the agroforestry model, to get it validated, then getting it validated also from ICAR and the agriculture establishment, so that there is unanimous consent that the model is appropriate. After that, once we started working on designing the project benefit sharing system, which I think is the second clear thing, that farmers need clear revenue visibility and benefit share has to be transparent. We actually discussed with the farmers through the process of a project council. We agreed that there will be a minimum 70% benefit to farmers. We saw that if we are able to do a very high benefit transfer in terms of percentages, with good design, it attracts higher value in terms of buyers, like he was saying. So the higher the amount that comes, the higher the benefit that goes to the community, the higher is our share. So we can't really fight for a larger share from the farmers. We should fight for a larger value for the farmers and smaller share for us. That's critical for longevity of the projects. You know, when we were doing, because we deeply engaged with the farmers, when we were doing this loan product, our teams met all of our farmers to agree as to who would like to borrow against future carbon cash flows and who would not. They understood that process so well that about 20% of them said they'll invest themselves. They don't want the money. So that's the level of clarity we need to bring. It's a lot of work, a lot of engagement on the ground. So that's the second point. Clear revenue visibility and a benefit share has to be appropriate and fair. The third is early benefits. We need to convert carbon from, or modify the way we use carbon finance from purely a result-based, backward-loaded product into upfront investments, pre-finance. Pre-finance in the form of investments, capex investments, incentives to farmers, because you see the problem is, especially in agroforestry and other such allied tree-based systems, is that the tangible revenue also starts after 4 years, and your carbon revenue also starts after 4 years. So the opportunity cost of the farmer who's going to shift to a system like this in the first 4 years is absolute. So we need to figure out a way of pre-financing. And I think when we are developing this mechanism in India, if we can include addressing the benefit share and pre-financing concerns from the very beginning, given that we'll have a long regulatory pathway of carbon sales, will be ideal. The fourth and final point from my side is engaging local institutions. Look, I also agree with what my co-panelist said, that government policy is very critical, investors are very critical, but the most important actor in this whole ecosystem is aggregators. Aggregators like us, because you have to aggregate land, you have to aggregate capital, you have to aggregate knowledge. But can we also add capacity for aggregation at one level closer to the farmers through FPOs, through SHGs, through panchayats, because farmers work on trust. And based on my 15 years of working with farmers in India, they work on trust and they are more averse to risk than interested in profit, by nature, because their core business is so risky. So can we figure out a model of engaging that tier of institutions in having much more agency to negotiate the sovereignty of pricing, sovereignty of benefit transfer, and MRV? That's very, very critical. Lastly, these organizations and the farmers themselves need to have a stake in measurements. While technology can really help bridge the gap in terms of accuracy, if the technology-led measurements are not owned by the communities, they don't understand it. Why am I getting 3 tons and not 4 tons? In the long run, there is going to be a disconnect and there is going to be issues with projects. So how do we bridge that gap and how do we leverage community knowledge? The indigenous knowledge of monitoring, measuring that we use. It's critical that we bridge that gap and those two come together. Thank you.
Excellent. I think excellent intervention. That you have, I think, brought most of the things in one intervention, that, it has to be co-created that. I think all the stakeholder engagement, everything, that word itself says the clarity in terms of benefit, clarity in terms of methodology, clarity in terms of timing, all these, kinds of put the, book open for the participants. I think excellent. So that's, I think, and then the pre-financing, so that, they are getting something at the beginning, so that they are not waiting for 4 years to fructify their projects. So excellent. Thank you for the input and intervention. So we'll finally go again to the finance. So the scaling of the carbon projects require predictable cash flow. And I think this is drawing now coming to you. How the robust farmers onboarding, again, the same trust issue, this is this. And then the financing, what financing and project structuring innovations, so the new ways of doing things, do you believe can ensure same the benefit sharing of this along with the farmer, while, again, looking at possibility of the expenses for MRV and other complexity or the outgoes as well as the income. So floor is yours.
Thank you. I think this was already addressed by my panelists, that for farmers, it is very important to know what is the revenue which they are going to get, because that is what will bring trust. When do they get that? How do they get that? One of the ways or innovations what we can look at is by using digital benefit sharing. As EcoGuard, what we are trying to come is a smart contract based digital sharing of revenues. So once the revenues are fixed with the farmers, it can be, as said, the 40%, 50%, 60%, they are locked in smart contracts. And when the payments are made by the sale of carbon credits, these are digitally transferred to their wallets or whatever means we have been. It can be the FPOs which get it and then they give it, because for individual farmers it may be very difficult, but at least the institutions which are involved. So this smart contract or digital benefit sharing is something, innovation which we see can help. The second innovation, what we also feel is, again, what we have trying to see in kind of a bamboo kind of a thing, where you don't look at the thing only as a carbon benefit. If you look at bamboo, which is there very primarily available in Northeast, when you are doing something in that kind of a thing, it does not only become a carbon project, it also becomes a livelihood project for farmers. And for bamboo, it is a low carbon pathway for a lot of other avoided emission activities, because bamboo can be then now used in construction materials, it can be used in any other things. So apart from the carbon finance, it has to be blended finance, that the livelihood is also taken care of. So these two innovations I feel are very important when you look at the whole value chain. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you have again supplemented Ms. Yashika's the developmental projects can have the carbon attributes, and it should not be seen just as a carbon project, but it would be on a larger project where carbon is one of the attributes which we can leverage for our market. So excellent. I think this is where I think we are completing our question round, and I'm also being asked to shoot a rapid round question to all of you. So the rapid round question is, you would get very limited words to choose and limited time. So the question is, who needs to step up? Okay, so who needs to step up in the next 2 to 3 years to make this thing happen? So you have very limited choice, and the choice is with you is government, private sector, or intermediary. So I'll start from Ms. Yashika first. And maybe I think I will take liberty to add, a tagline along with that. Sure. Why government, then why farmer, man, why?
I'll probably start with government, because government's direction on policy and regulation is extremely important. Without that, I don't think so we can get private sector players. We can't get like MRV solutions, anything, unless we know that what sectors are involved, what are the rules, who can participate, so that is a very important part for any market to function efficiently. So I would start with government, and maybe others can choose different options, because we know.
So others have others' choices. Now I'll go next to who is in the second line. Mr. Jan, your choice.
Sir, I would also say government.
Go with the government,
yeah.
Okay.
And sir, I'll also give the rationale. So one of the biggest opportunities to bring in cash into the country in India is compliance markets. and a compliance-based exports, right? So I think we have come up with a list. But on the agriculture side, if we talk about CCUS is a category, if we define what does CCUS and which subcategories are allowed, it can open up huge amount of long-term offtakes and bring cash into the country. So I think that is one big thing that we can solve for and fast as compared to our neighbors.
Government, okay. And then Mr. Mehra.
Hard for me to pick one. Definitely government. We are one of the few countries which is setting up a compliance system right now. If we do the right goal setting, the right target setting, create demand, and if we define the right kind of methodologies, we can be a global leader in this space and attract a lot of capital from overseas, from India. So definitely the government has a major role to play. But the second, I would also say intermediaries. Intermediaries need to right now act as market makers and not middlemen in order to really define the principles, really create projects which are lasting in order to ensure private investors that their investments are safe. So those two.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I think everybody has said government, but I would like to differ. I would like to say the intermediaries, because I think we have the example here of Varaha, Ayora, because farmers cannot act alone. They will always need the support of this system to be able to come into the markets. So I think the intermediaries will play a very major role when it comes to getting the farmers into the market.
Thank you. I think we have a balanced, little bit tilted toward government, but we have some balancing act from your side. So excellent presentation. I think at least from my side, I had a huge learning from the interventions that you all have presented here, and I'm sure that audience here would certainly have added value to the kind of experience and knowledge that you have shared. So with that, I think, again, to conclude, while thanking all of you, I think some of the key features of the discussion that has emerged is the stakeholders. We have kind of identified government, private, intermediaries, the farmers themselves, and understanding the nature of the farmer and farming land, ecosystem, everything has to be really deeply understood. And then the mechanics of it, testing, whether it is MRV, all these things have to be consistent, clear, and having you can say, embedded with the technology to help the weaknesses or the challenges that the participants would have. I think all blend together. I think this, the whole ecosystem, our aim is that the farmers would not just be the balance receiver of the ultimate balance, then they would be participating in the whole process of this emerging market. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts and sharing your knowledge. So with that, I think, do we have time for questions?
Okay, we can take a question from there.
Yeah, we'll take maybe one burning question.
Question. Could you please pass
Please
the mic
introduce
over?
yourself, and if you can identify the panelist.
Right
whom
here,
you are
at the
asking.
center, at the center. Thank you.
Hi. Hello, everyone. This is Sachin. I work for HDFC Bank. To what Ms. Malik said, the private lending, I come from private lending space, and private institutions, just like us, we have been, looking after this carbon space since a long time, and we are trying to build a financial product, to what ma'am said, by aggregating farmers and using digital MRV. But as a banker or the banks in total, the crucial element is how do we mitigate the risk? If a project is registered, what are the chances that it will not fly off? Because banks or the private institutions, before lending, we want the benefit of risk. How risk can be mitigated, or anyone from the panel, how are you mitigating the risk?
So, well, I'll shoot to the finance guy. So, if you could.
So again, this is a very good question, because looking at a very traditional structures for banks, it definitely is very difficult. But again, I will want to quote what World Bank has done with Standard Chartered in Africa. What they have done is they have come up with an outcome-based bond. So there's an outcome-based bond which is there for cook stores. It is a $200 million bond. So this kind of structures may work in the way where you can have some kind of outcome-based structure. I think this is what I can think of. Anybody else wants to add?
Any other panelist wants to?
Look, I think a carbon project has two separate layers of risk. One is conventional project finance risk, which you guys know much better than all of us because you've been financing projects. Obviously, agriculture is a different kind of a beast, and many banks have teams on agriculture working especially to look at agri-risk. And there are issues of aggregation there. There are issues of how you finance, whether through collectives, etc. So that's one layer. The second layer specific to carbon is carbon risk, whether once the project is operational, whether the carbon value will be realized. So there are ways and means to offset that risk. There are firstly is to get a project developer to do a quality offtake with a buyer who is credible. You know, like a Microsoft or hopefully soon in India, large Indian companies will start doing those offtakes. That's one. The second is that there is an emerging field of insurance. There are people who are willing to insure carbon offtake and insure carbon prices. So that space is also now slowly rising. The third is that for any bank like yours, it will only make sense to enter this space if you finance a whole portfolio of projects, because you can't take risk of carbon on a single project. So, because there will be some defaults, some issues in generation. So you need to have a portfolio strategy, and along with offtakes and insurance, I think that's the way to go. I think that once the CCTS is operational and there is volume there, this becomes much easier because then you have a policy-led long-term price curve. In the voluntary market right now, there is no single source of truth, right, whether price will go forward or not. But then you will have a curve which is endorsed by the government, and you know there will be some offtake. So this will become easier then.
Yeah. Thank you.
So with that, I think, please join me in thanking the panelists for their wonderful interview.
Thank you. Thank you to all the esteemed panelists for sharing their knowledge with us. It was indeed a very informative session. Can I request you to please stay back on stage for a moment? And I would invite Mr. Shiv Bhatia on the stage to kindly felicitate all the panelists. Beginning with our chair and moderator, Dr. Ashok Kumar, Deputy Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Ms. Yashika Malik, Climate Change Specialist, World Bank. Ma'am, can I request you to please step forward? Mr. Madhur Jain, CEO, Varaha. Sir, can I request you to please step forward? Mr. Swapta Mehra, CEO, Iora Ecological Solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, a little more applauses would be truly appreciated. And Mr. Yashodhan Ramteke, CEO, EcoGuard Global. Can I request you all to please come together for a quick photo opportunity? Maybe we can keep the bags at the chairs. We can keep the bags at the chairs. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much once again. Thank you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we move forward to our next plenary session for the day. Which is going to be on unlocking carbon finance for implementation of clean technologies. So achieving global climate goals requires more than ambition. It demands investment on a scale. Clean technologies such as energy storage, green hydrogen, and carbon capture offer the potential to decarbonize industries and economies, but financing gaps remain a critical barrier to implementation. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this panel, we will focus on the pathways to mobilize and scale climate finance for clean technology deployment and explore the innovative financial instruments, including green bonds, blended finance, and carbon markets that can de-risk investments. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that we all have been posting online by far. And whatever you are uploading, make sure you use the hashtag PRAKRITI 2026. And let me tell you that we are also highlighting some of the posts on the social media wall that we have outside. So make sure that you do not forget to check your post on our social media wall. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, for this panel, kindly join me in welcoming on stage our respected chair and moderator for the session, Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Energy Transition Leader. Ladies and gentlemen, with a big round of applause, please welcome our chair and moderator for the session on the stage. Welcome to you, sir. With that, can I request you to please put your hands together for our brilliant panelists who have joined us here today, Mr. Anand Shukla, Senior Advisor, Swiss Development Cooperation, Mr. Sachin Kumar, Vice President, Energiva Ventures Private Limited, Mr. Alistair Ritchie, Director, Asia Society Policy Institute, and Mr. Indrajit Singh, Partner, Deloitte, India. Welcome, welcome to you all. Over to you, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you. Let me first thank the Bureau of Energy Efficiency for inviting me. And it's really a privilege hosting such a stellar panel as we have today. And the topic is also quite apt and extremely important, given that we heard the Honorable Minister yesterday talk about the carbon markets being in motion in the next 4 months. How do we unlock carbon finance for implementation of clean technologies? Now, if you look at the landscape in this country and ask a question, have we actually used carbon markets in large-scale systemic change in clean technologies? Yes, we have. There are at least 2 examples that I know of, large-scale examples. The first one was actually implemented by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency way back in 2010, called the Bachat Lamp Yojana, which actually ushered in the CFL era. And interestingly, I don't know if many people know, this is something which inspired EESL to take up the Ujala scheme. Of course, the carbon element of it had gone away by then. The second example that I do know of public sector programs is a program called Gram Ujala program, which was implemented by EESL in 2001 or so. But I think those were the times when we were looking at voluntary carbon market. Now with the CCTS being round the corner, what are the things that can be done? So let me bring in my first panelist, Mr. Anand Shukla, who's a senior advisor at the Embassy of Switzerland and also leads climate change mitigation. He has more than 30 years of experience and has worked with GIZ, ENY, and so on and so forth. And let me turn to Mr. Shukla and maybe take your thoughts on how can bilateral cooperation, such as from Switzerland, provide the right mix of grants, technical assistance, and policy support to help emerging economies adopt best practices from other markets like the EU ETS and the Korean market, or even Mr. Shukla?
Thank you. Thank you for your question, and thanks for inviting us. It's a privilege to be part of this panel discussion. And coming back to your question, since I'm part of the international cooperation, some keywords are very, very important, whatever initiative we take. Cooperation, collaboration, partnership, knowledge transfer, capacity building. I think this is an embedded thing in all our initiatives there. Now, how do we do actually the international cooperation? There are 3 elements, 3 core elements I would say we follow: science, policy, and action. I'll give you examples also how do we do that and how that relates to in the carbon market there. When it comes to science, we have a project on low carbon cement, and it's a material research actually that we are supporting, and it's almost 10 years of support that we have provided, the Swiss support. It's a collaboration between the Swiss and Indian academic institutes along with the industry partner, because we want to go for a scale and fast-paced scale. And cement being driven largely by the private sector, it was very important to involve actually from day one. And what happened in last 10 years, the work we started from lab, it has gone actually for approval by BIS. It's an approved cement standard. And now if you look at actually, you simply Google it actually, you will find actually JK Lakshmi and JK Cement have already started its commercial production. That's one example on science part. Policy part, that's in the building sector. We work very closely with Bureau of Energy Efficiency for almost 15 years. In 15 years, a lot of actually things were carried out, but one specific example is the Eco-Nivas Samhita, the energy efficiency code for the building sector. That's the policy impact that we have. Now, when it comes to the action, that's on air pollution. We are working very closely with the World Bank here. It's in Indo-Gangetic Plain. So what happens there, there are solutions already exist, whether you say in the transport sector, industrial sector, a lot of work has already been done. Now the point is, how do we scale it up? Where do we the finance coming from? World Bank has a large program on air quality management in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. They have actually allocated 2.5 billion there. So we provide technical assistance so that the city or the national level cleaner action plan can be enacted, and World Bank taking that as a basis to disperse the money to these countries and the states there. Very clear-cut example, as on date, you see in UP and Haryana in India, they have already allocated $300 million for the sectoral intervention. So what I want to say actually, we look at where do we have impact, how do we scale it up, what's the value addition there. That's the crux of our international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Extremely well said. Where do we put in our resources where impact can be done? How do we leverage other players like the World Bank, which you mentioned? And how do we take private sector right from the very beginning so that the investment risk, etc., is also taken care of? I'll come back to you, Mr. Shukla, in a bit, but let me turn my attention to Mr. Sachin Kumar, who is a Vice President in Energia Ventures Limited. He has over 2 decades of experience in environment and energy sector and has worked in Shakti, TERI, and many, many others organizations in the past. So my question to you is, as a very senior leader in a venture, what are the biggest investment risks you see in the clean energy projects today? And how can revenues from the carbon markets de-risk these investment risks?
Thank you, sir. And first, let me thank BE for inviting me. And sir, this is an honor to be in your panel. And thank you for the question. So I think, to me, if I say from the investor perspective and coming from an industry background, I see there are 2-3 main challenges. The one very pertinent challenge for any investor is the policy one, which every investor sees in terms of continuity and the consistency of the policy. So for any investor, I think the most important part is whether the policy is consistent and whether it is continuing, because any sudden change in the policy can impact his decision to invest. The second, apart from policy to me, is the implementation aspect. For example, for any new technology, when we talk about, say, the futuristic technologies, in terms of, say, even the green hydrogen or carbon capture or battery storage, for all these technology, we need implementation. And for implementation, there are certain challenges which are, I would say, structural in terms of a regulatory system, for example, land acquisition. And then I think it becomes most important for an investor to understand whether he will be able to, or he or she will be able to got those necessary clearances from the system. So that's another challenge that I perceive. And the third challenge, which again become important from an investor perspective, is basically related to the readiness of these technologies. Whether these technologies are ready to be deployed, at what stage they are. Because for any investor, to invest in a nascent technology becomes a challenge. So I think these are some of the challenges that I see from the investor perspective. But coming back to the stream, sir, that you mentioned in terms of the carbon, I think that is a very, very well laid out financial system, because we were having a discussion with Mr. Alistair Ritchie when I was in Shakti and trying to work on the Indian carbon market. So I think the carbon certificate or the carbon scheme, that gives a very tangible revenue stream to any entity, and for any investor, this is something new, an additional revenue source. So that gives that kind of confidence to the investor that there is an additional tangible revenue scheme that can help. And sir, since I mentioned about the challenge, let me also give you one very bright experience that I came across a few days back in terms of the land acquisition. I think last year when ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel, they tried to set up a plant in Andhra Pradesh, they got the necessary land clearances in less than 3 months. And I think if this kind of regulatory ecosystem is there in place in India, for any investor to invest in the new technology, that becomes very feasible. So let me take a pause here, sir. And
thank you. I think 3 very clear points you laid out, that you need policy consistency, you need sustainability of policies over a long term, governments to reduce and remove kind of structural problems like the land acquisition, and of course, readiness of technology. And these are the kind of inherent risks, but carbon revenues over a period of time can really help in overcoming these challenges. So again, Mr. Kumar, I will come back to you in the second round. Let me now turn to my other colleague, Mr. Alistair Ritchie, who is a Director of Asia Pacific Sustainability at the Asia Society Policy Institute, where he leads the Asian carbon market development. He is an expert in ETS, emission trading schemes, and has been undertaking many projects to support India's CCTS. So thank you very much for all your support. My question to you, Alistair, is how can India use Article 6 cooperative approaches to create a predictable international revenue stream that improves the risk-return profile for clean energy technologies, particularly storage, hydrogen, CCUS? Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much for the question. And I'd like to perhaps pick up on some practical points. So firstly, there's a need to build a streamlined national authorization framework to provide clarity on the rules and the processes and the systems so that projects can get implemented under Article 6.2 to generate ITMOs in particular, and also Article 6.4 emission reductions. So this is going to require clarity around the eligibility criteria for projects, as well as the application and authorization process, including the letter of authorization, the LOA process, which is needed for the projects to go ahead, define timelines and fee structures and approach for corresponding adjustment, and also agreements between central government and state governments, because states have an important role in identifying projects and making land available, land tenure issues, and also the basics like the communication with the government officials. And in terms of the projects, there's a need from project developers for greater definition on which projects are going to be applicable. So we have a list of 13 activities, but that would have to be more specific to understand exactly which projects can fit into that. And associated with that is the potential overlap between the compliance mechanism under the CCTS with Article 6.2. So a CCUS or green hydrogen steelmaking project could be relevant to an obligated entity under the compliance mechanism of the CCTS. So you can't get a double benefit of the benefiting from the reductions under CCTS as well as selling credits as an ITMO. So that would need to be clarified. In terms of the cooperation agreements, clearly India has a memorandum of cooperation with Japan, which is a start, but it needs to be implemented. There's still questions about which projects would be eligible. Do they have to be ones that started after the signature date of the agreement, or can older projects be applicable? How to define the Japanese contribution, and specific technical issues like CCUS projects, who takes responsibility for leakage of CO2? But then also there's a financial aspect, so which Japanese buyers would be willing to invest in the 13 activities, which are relatively expensive technologies, so the capex requirements is quite high, so the dollars per ton may be higher. Japan has agreements with 30 other countries, so why would it want to implement this? So there needs to be more cooperation agreements, clearly, and the agreement with Japan would have to be implemented. And then associated with that is the activities to be included, and we understand this would be an evolving list. In time, additional activities will get added, and recognizing that project developers see the current list as very exclusive and quite restricted, and Indian credits might be too highly priced for the market. So the activities could be expanded, but the risk of complying with the NDC can be controlled by approaches such as, you know, pay two, get one. So the buyer can pay for two reductions, and then they get one, and then India's NDC risk can be controlled. So that's also a critical factor. You don't just sell cheap credits and so on. And then also looking at the technologies that the buyer countries are interested and able to provide. So I think there's a lot of practical issues, but there's a huge potential. India clearly has a massive capability in technology, and just to sort of streamline and ensure this process is smooth and streamlined will enable India to become a leader in the future rather than a follower at the moment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. I think very aptly said, there is a need for streamlining. There is a lot of effort needed to identify projects with synergies between center and state. And of course, as you mentioned, there are so many other bilateral carbon markets. India has already kind of joined the JCM and many others. There is a need to see that everything works together so that there is no double counting, there is no loss of revenues for the investors and the countries who are looking to buy Article 6 credit. So I'll come back to you. Let me turn to Mr. Indrajit Singh, who is a partner in climate change and sustainability practice at Deloitte, and he has more than 2 decades of work experience in GHG mitigation, CDM advisory, sustainability, and so on and so forth. My question to you, Mr. Singh, is drawing on your very extensive advisory work, how can green bonds, carbon-linked instruments, and digital carbon market infrastructure be designed to de-risk investments and scale finance for hard-to-abate sectors like CCUS, steel, cement, power? Mr. Singh.
Right. Thank you very much for the question. Apparently, when we look at these sectors, they were essentially covered under the Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme of India, which is now getting migrated into carbon capture, which is migrating into CCTS now. Now, basis the understanding that I am carrying with me, the problem statement can be divided
Mr. Singh, we are not able to hear at all.
I believe there is a lot of feedback.
It's better. If you can just...
I'll keep it next to me. So we can bifurcate the problem statement into 3 different categories. The first one is the inherent technological risk. So these are not, say, for example, the PAT cycle 1 or PAT cycle 2, wherein the low-hanging fruits were essentially being taken care of by the industry all by themselves. So the first risk, when, say, for example, we are migrating from Perform, Achieve and Trade to CCTS, is the technological risk. The second one predominantly, which is for the industry to look at, is the long payback period. And the third one inherently is the pricing of the carbon instrument. So when we are looking at these 3 different statements, we have to look at how various markets have evolved. We can practically draw our learnings from the European Union's emissions trading scheme, which was by and large institutionalized based upon learning by doing. We have seen the prices going up to about 30 euros in 2006 itself, falling down to about €1 in 2007. And therefore, it is very clear that the first port of call goes to the government, goes to the regulators, goes to the policymakers to bring in some kind of certainty in terms of how the carbon instruments will be priced. Whether we are looking at the domestic demand, whether we are looking at the instruments under Article 6.2, wherein we already have carried out, say, for example, the joint agreement with the Japanese government, or whether we are looking at the possibility of Article 6.4 instruments, the first thing that needs to be bring in order or should be brought in order is the pricing of the instruments. And if we look at the trends, of the transactions that have been carried out in Asia Pacific in early 2025. The prices have already been, I believe, if my memory serves me right, were somewhere between $18 to about $40 to a ton of emission reductions. So the first element is that if there is some kind of underlying minimum guarantee that can be provided by the government to the carbon instruments, that will remove first degree of uncertainty. On the second front, we can look at how the mechanics of investment can work out. We have seen how corporate social responsibility or the philanthropic investments have started moving ahead right from 2012 when it was introduced in India. So we can look at the possibility of who will take the first loss in case of any incorrect outcome of the investment. So there can be possibility wherein, say, for example, any intervention may not provide the right kind of output or the desired emission reductions. This can well be provided through by looking at coupons. So we can look at a coupon which can operate at, say, for example, 8%. If we are overachieving in terms of emission reductions, then the intended output, the value of the coupon goes down by 1% or so. If it is, say, for example, underperforming, the coupon rate may go up. That's one way of looking at it. In addition to this, maybe on the sidelines of the whole exercise of how to look at these outputs, we can also possibly conceive how long-term emission reduction purchase agreements were carried out in the previous era of carbon markets, and at least between 2006-07, when the price discovery was very much visibly there in the primary CDM markets, and we could plan as to what would be the value between the supply of emission reductions and the value realized in the secondary CR market minus the deductions. One can bring those investments into the forefront. I believe in the previous session, the fellow from IORA talked about it, that we need those kinds of investments come and play their role when we are actually financing the project. So there are all these ways and means which can bring in some kind of discipline, and obviously I still need to answer to the last part of your question wherein you have talked about how the digital MRV can practically help. When we are looking at the disclosures which are going out, and I'm only talking about the compliance disclosures that are happening from the listed companies in India under BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, we are able to now collate the data for each and every day of how much fuel that we have consumed, how much emissions are going into atmosphere, and if, say, for example, we also bring in the impact of any kind of process improvement that is resulting into emission reductions, even at the industrial level, at least for the larger industries wherein the systems are very much in place, wherein the data can be lifted from the data lakes itself almost on regular basis or at least on per batch basis, that is something which is going to bring down, first of all, the cost of monitoring. The second thing which it can create is that one thing which I have talked about earlier is coupons. The second element could be tokenization. That's the second area in which we can create the market. If you look at, say, for example, how we used to buy gold earlier, it was physical gold. From physical gold, we have moved to ETFs. From ETFs, we have moved to mutual funds. By doing the tokenization, we can actually bring down the overall availability or the investment that is required to invest into carbon markets. We can buy a fraction of 1 ton of emission reductions. And I believe all these things are going to bring in the right kind of confidence in the market, introduction of new players in the market, and the kind of output that we are expecting in terms of new age financing that can bolster the growth of Indian carbon market. I'll take a pause here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Singh. As we close the first round of questions, which was basically how do we de-risk clean technologies, I think what I hear from the panel is essentially collaboration is essential. It's also important to identify where the gaps are, which need to be filled up. How do we make sure that the policy remains consistent and of course, streamline our ongoing systems and also new systems that are coming in, and how do we integrate the world at large, particularly in the carbon markets, to make it grow further. And of course, Mr. Singh's point on how do we use blended finance, the CSRs, the philanthropies, how do we make information more symmetrical, more transparent, more digital, so that it helps things like tokenization, which can bring in much more investments. Now, in my second round, let me have a discussion on structuring carbon-linked finance to unlock scalable technologies. And let me first come to Mr. Shukla. Bilateral donors often provide TA alongside grants and loans. From your perspective, which de-risking tools like guarantees, first loss, currency hedge work best for unlock commercial finance for CCUS, green hydrogen in emerging economies? And how can they be scaled through Article 6 of the Paris Agreement?
Thank you for the question, and I think I could do PhD on this question also. As we know, Switzerland is known for its innovation and startup ecosystem. And a lot of work is already happening on CCUS and also hydrogen energy. Plus, I would add energy storage as well. There are so many clean tech companies looking at India as a big market because they have technology, they have mature technologies, but at the right time. The timing is very important here. Now, they are in fact exploring the business opportunities under India's revised, updated NDC. They're waiting for it. So I think from that perspective, financing is going to roll out on a very large scale here on these technologies which you just mentioned. If I come back to 3 examples which I gave earlier, on cement sector, it was the grant, pure grant for 10 years, almost 100 crores spent on that research along with the private sector there. Because when cement is responsible for 1/6 of the global CO2 emissions there, it makes sense to invest that much actually and that long also, because we always take long-term and flexible approach so that we adapt our approach as the project rolls on there. The second project on building energy efficiency, that what I mentioned, Ekoniva Samhita, the code, we worked for government because that was India's first energy efficiency code, especially for the residential building. Now, government has already started investing on that. We invested initially, we took risk, but Swiss know-how and with a bit of customization, we made out of our experiences and supported the government of India. I mean to say Bureau of Energy Efficiency. The third example, as I mentioned earlier, it's the World Bank loan component there. But loan component is also bringing the technical assistance there. So our contribution to the World Bank is for the technical assistance, so that we can keep track of how the money is being spent there, it's going in the right way there, the desired impact are achieved there. So I think there is no specific financing model, I would say. No solution fits everywhere, I would say here. It's important to define the use case, and that use case proceed with the financial instrument there. So the point is actually a use case has to be defined very, very clearly in the beginning. It could be, in large-scale technologies like hydrogen or CCUS. So there it could be a blended finance because one entity will not be able to risk at first go in the beginning, but it has to be blended options there. So that would be my take especially for the large scale interventions there and to scale it up. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're absolutely right. There is no one size that fits all. You need different financial instruments for different types of intervention, and of course, blended finance for hard-to-abate sector is actually the way to go, given the kind of technology risk that exists today. So let me come to Mr. Sachin Kumar. And Mr. Kumar, as a venture investor focused on clean tech, what are the 3 biggest financing bottlenecks you face when you are structuring deals for, let's say, battery storage or green hydrogen projects in India? And also, can carbon revenues change your internal rate of return calculations?
Thank you, sir, for the question. I think let me start with what my colleague Indrajit has mentioned, the term first loss. So, sir, the technology that you mentioned, whether it's the green hydrogen or carbon capture, they are still not proven at a commercial scale in India. So, this is one of the biggest challenge for any investor because, especially for the Indian context, if the technology is not yet proven, where is the confidence for any investor to invest in the technology? So that is one of the, I would say, the foremost bottleneck in terms of the challenges faced by the investor. The second is, I think there is still not the demand anchoring for these new technologies and long-term offtake agreements. For example, when we talk about, say, green hydrogen, if you see the analysis, the demand for the green hydrogen in India, say by 2050, it will be mainly by the steel sector. So out of, say, around 50 million ton of green hydrogen demand by 2050, 9 to 10 million ton will be from the steel sector only. But if we see the investment going on in the steel sector, this is still in a different route altogether, which doesn't rely on hydrogen. So the signals are very different to the investor in terms of the technology being deployed or in terms of the green technology that we talk about. The third, I would say, the challenge for any investment will be basically, again, the execution challenge, because all these technologies, they are not a single equipment. They are not operating in vacuum. They are all interconnected. For example, green hydrogen, it all depends on the streamlining of renewable energy. They depend on the electrolyzer. They depend on the water. And some of the components are imported. So there is a whole value chain. Or if any of this value chain that get disrupted, this is a risk for the investor. So they are not operating in vacuum. You take any other technology. And sir, the question that you asked in terms of the carbon in the internal rate of return, as I mentioned initially also, the carbon credit that gives an additional revenue stream, which is a very tangible revenue stream. And for any investor, if you have a tangible revenue scheme, which is improving your rate of return, it's a big confidence for any investor to invest in that technology or in that ecosystem. And to me, these are the challenges which can be overcome by basically, as I said initially, sir, in terms of improving the regulatory ecosystem, improving the investor confidence by going ahead with those technologies where at least some push can be given by the policy as such. Thank you.
Thank you. I think extremely important point, commercialization of technology, big question mark when you talk about hard-to-abate sectors. Conflicting demand signals, that's an extremely important point, and you really give the example of the steel sector, then value chain disruptions, given what we are seeing around the world, this is an extremely important, but yes, the silver lining is a carbon revenue. If there is a stable carbon revenue stream, many of these things become easier for investors like you to take it up. Let me turn to Mr. Rishi. Rishi, how can India's new CCTS be used to mobilize climate finance at scale?
Great. No, thank you very much for the question. And I would start by saying that the CCTS, as a form of emissions trading system, must not only be looked at as a carbon pricing policy to drive low carbon action through the impact of the carbon price signal, to drive low carbon investment and operational decisions, like a conventional ETS is intended to do, and it does, but also as a climate finance tool. Globally, countries realize this now, and globally, emissions trading systems have generated in the region of $400 billion of revenue, primarily from auctioning of allowances to the power sector. This money is used to support investment in decarbonisation technology in hard-to-abate sectors, especially technology that's not yet commercially viable, as well as clean energy transition, just transition, and multiple other beneficial opportunities. And our analysis at Asia Society Policy Institute suggests that India's carbon credit trading scheme, the compliance mechanism, could generate over $500 billion of revenue in the period up to 2050. So what would be needed to do that? So the CCTS is a good policy, it's a good start, but the key is to develop the policy deliberately to generate and mobilize climate finance. Just like the examples in Japan, in North America, in Europe. So we suggest this would require at least 4 steps. So number 1, make a decision on when to include the power sector in the CCTS. It doesn't have to be included tomorrow, but it will need to be included. Every major successful ETS globally has the power sector included. This will support the achievement of India's net zero target and its NDC commitments. It will help to support the clean energy transition. But I would say that energy security concerns can be perfectly addressed by the way in which it's included. So the targets can be intensity-based. They can allow for flexibility. They can allow for the current operation to continue and a very gradual transition. Look at China, Indonesia, South Korea, Europe, North America, loads of experience. So, for example, it could be 2030. Number 2, plan for the transition to an allocation-based ETS. So all of the best practice ETS is globally allocation-based, not baseline and credit. The only baseline and credit systems apart from CCTS is Japan's GX ETS, which will move to allocation-based from next month, phase 2. Australian safeguard mechanism, Alberta, but these don't create the liquidity because the credits are only available at the end of the compliance cycle. There's small volume and it doesn't work as well. The allocation-based system enables auctioning of allowances and it enables free allocation to industry exposed to carbon leakage risk. So the plan should be to set a date. It might be that 2035 we start auctioning. Plenty of time to prepare and identify which sectors can be included. South Korea recently announced 50% auctioning for the power sector by 2030, 100% by 2035. Japan will auction its power sector emissions by 2033. China will start auctioning in all sectors by 2027. So every country realizes that auctioning is important. It's not only about generating revenue, and in fact, that's not the primary purpose. The primary purpose is to create a strong carbon pricing signal. It's the polluter pays principle, and vulnerable consumers can be perfectly well protected. Number 3, we would say, is to facilitate the auctioning. So that's a lot about the power market interaction with CCTS. We produced a paper in January, a report on how this could work in India. It's actually very feasible. There's loads of experience and precedent in India on how environmental costs are can be reflected in wholesale and retail power markets and pass through. And then develop the finance mechanism. There's loads of great experience globally now. So the next point is that, the last point is, this can all be done much quicker if India follows the example of, say, Japan in introducing a sovereign climate transition bond. So what Japan has done, they have a GX ETS and they're planning, like I say, to auction by 2033, but since 2024, 2 years ago now, they have made available $130 billion of revenue available to Japanese industry in hard-to-abate sectors to invest in decarbonisation technology. And these bonds will be paid back by auction revenue from the GX ETS. And this is a great way of mobilizing finance very quickly. So in the next 2 years, this could happen in India, just to check the feasibility, and then tens of billions of dollars could be flowing through, even if India decides by 2035 to start auctioning in the power sector. The money could start flowing within 2 years. So this is a huge opportunity to support decarbonisation by 2030.
Thank you. I think very important messages here, that CCTS should become the climate finance tool of Government of India, possibly generate over 500 billion revenue by 2050, and your key point, power sector needs to come in as quickly as it possibly can. So I'm sure we would take note of all these suggestions and act accordingly. Mr. Singh, let me come to you. Deloitte's recent report estimates India needs about $1.5 trillion in climate investment by 2030, with a significant share going to green hydrogen, energy storage, and CCUS. How can financial instruments like green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, and green InvITs be structured, especially with carbon price-linked coupons to make large-scale energy storage and CCUS projects bankable and attract more long-term funds like the pension funds in India?
Right, we can essentially draw the learnings from what we have been traditionally doing in the renewable energy sector. So what we have done essentially is created SPVs just to ring fence the investments which are being carried out, and typically the payout of bond amount or the monies to the investor goes from the PPAs and maybe the carbon income which was there in the erstwhile era during the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. I believe for the new age investments which are required now, when we are looking at multiple other avenues to reduce our emissions, because we are no longer in baseline and credit regime, we are more in a regime that is cap and trade, or very similar to how European Union is operating. And beyond that, there are multiple ways to look at it, that we have our own domestic markets, we are looking at 6.2, 6.4, and even the offsets which are going to come and play a meaningful role depending upon how we are managing the demand and supply. So the first idea that comes to any common person is to draw from the success of what the renewable energy sector has done in past. So creating a possibility of ring fencing the investment so that the balance sheet of a company or books of the company are not responsible for the payment of bonds. So some kind of risk hedging is involuntarily being provided right at the time of creating that particular structure. In addition to this, when we are looking at the possibilities of various instruments, whether it is green bonds, whether it is sustainability-linked bonds, whether it is the InvIT structure, there is a layering that we need to define. So when we are talking about green bonds, we should essentially look at it for the implementation or the construction phase. When we are looking at sustainability-linked bonds, we should look at the credit enhancement, which is the intermediary requirement. When we are looking at the InvIT structure, because we have seen the success of InvIT, though it is fairly limited in case of India, but yes, there is a success. When we are looking at that, we need to look at InvITs from the point of view of monetization of the assets. So typically, these are the items which are going to create the different layers so as to minimize the kind of risk that the sector may face in the initial days of its growth, and beyond that, a stable market. We have seen how, say, for example, the REC market has operated in India. There is a clear supply overhang. And it is not the fixing of base price and the forbearance price that would result in the demand, but it is something else that may be required. So we don't need to look elsewhere. Our own learnings can practically be applied in creating the right kind of safeguards to ensure that the market performs the way we are expecting. Right from the very beginning, if we look at when the new government came into play in 2014, the very clear idea of Prime Minister Modi was that we should have minimum government, maximum governance. So it was left on to the market forces, and therefore whatever we have learned from various institutes that have played out a role, whether it is in the REC space or the ESERT space, we should make sure that when we are playing out on the CCTS market, the learnings are applied in a manner wherein all possible market instruments may have a role to play. So we can also use the kind of money which can come from bilateral multilaterals. We can look at the senior investments wherein companies are using their treasury investments to play in this market. So I believe we'll have to go with a multitude of approach to make sure that this market succeeds and we create champions among ourselves in order to make sure that they don't just contribute to the decarbonization of the country, they also make it in a very profitable or sustainable manner. I'll take a pause.
Thank you. Very relevant points. Risk need to be managed. The government needs to be nimble and make sure that this market that is getting created actually lives up to the promise. So this brings me to the end of the round two. And the key messages that I've taken from the panelists is that you need blended finance, but you also need, there's no one size fit all. I mean, different projects, different programs need different kinds of capital. There's a need for good demand signals for long-term technologies. You can't have a conflicting demand signals so that industry is not able to come in. Also, if done well, which I'm sure BE and Power Ministry will do, this CCTS has can really become the climate finance tool of India, and we need appropriate risk mitigation and market development mechanisms as we move ahead. This brings me to the last part of the question, and I'll request my panelists to restrict their answers in a couple of minutes, please. I have two questions, and you can choose to answer both or any one of them for all the panelists. What is the one concrete, actionable recommendation would you give today to policymakers to accelerate carbon finance for clean technology deployment by 2030, by your own experiences or what you have been helping other countries to do? Number two is carbon markets are not the only one piece of puzzle. What complementary non-carbon financing mechanisms are most urgently needed in India to crowd in institutional capital for hard-to-abate sectors? So, starting with you, Mr. Shukla.
Thank you, and very quickly. I will divide in two sections here. The big interventions, big ticket projects, and the small interventions there. I'm always concerned about the small interventions there, how they become the part of the carbon market and the climate finance. So in the morning, actually, we were discussing about the buildings there, how to integrate buildings in the carbon market. So that's a bit of challenge here, how to integrate the small interventions there. So from that angle, my suggestion would be to scale standardized and aggregated carbon projects. That means bundling the small projects with simplified MRV system there. That's my take actually for your question one. And the second, what you said actually only one piece of puzzle. I would say with my little thinking or little understanding on CCUS and the energy storage, to de-risk these kind of interventions, large-scale projects through public finance tools. That's my take for the second one. Thank you.
Thank you. Sachin?
So let me choose the question one to respond, and I did mention about the challenges that we face from the regulatory side. So let me come from that angle and say if possible for Bureau, and if we see the learning from the PAT scheme, so if it is possible to see if there is a floor price for the carbon, that might help in the long run. And if we draw the experience from the international market as well, that says so. For example, if you see the contract for difference from the UK, one of the main policy lever they have used for offshore wind projects. Similarly, if you see the Germany, they have gone ahead with the long-term contract for the green hydrogen. So I think, to me, that is one lever that can be used by the government of India to see how the carbon market flourish in the country. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Alistair?
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, one recommendation I'd make, building on what I mentioned earlier, is under the National Steering Committee for the Indian carbon market to constitute a committee or a working group to investigate and develop proposals for a CCTS energy transition finance mechanism. And this committee or working group can look into how the CCTS can be used to provide this climate finance through the use of, say, auction revenue, so it can support power and industrial decarbonisation, as well as just energy transition. And this should include proposals on how to generate revenue, but also investigate the feasibility of the climate transition bond, which I mentioned earlier. So this is all a great opportunity under the notification of the CCTS, the National Steering Committee already has this power to constitute working groups for recommendations by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency to constitute these. So this would be a great way of making a start and getting some experts together to work out how this opportunity could be realized. And then the second point about the complementary aspects, I would mention a couple of points. One is to establish credible long-term decarbonisation pathways and timelines for key sectors like power, cement, steel, so that investors have visibility on the future demand and policy support. This would obviously be consistent with the NDC and consistent with the net zero pathway. And then secondly, to define and communicate green and transition taxonomies so that investors can confidently finance projects without regulatory or reputational risk. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair.
Right from the kind of thoughts that I am able to conceive, I would look at it from the lens of wherein we are not just looking at, say, for example, CCTS, but maybe alongside it, if there are international regulations that may have a role to play. So essentially, when we are looking at carbon markets, we should look at the non-tariff barriers which are coming to us in the form of CBAM. Not all sectors are getting impacted, but let's say the example of iron and steel, aluminium, which may have a bearing, or those who are practically witnessing it firsthand from 1st of January 2026. So the way I look at this problem statement is that rather than looking at simply CCTS approach, can we look at it very similar to in-setting approach? So instead of going gate to gate when we are looking at any steel facility, can we go cradle to gate approach? And by doing so, we are not just improving the environmental footprint of our own organization in terms of the efficiency gain or the overall CO2 emissions, but we are also bringing in the supply chain as part of our whole internal exercise. And that may have a dual role to play when we are, say, for example, negotiating externally in terms of the commodities that we are selling in the international market. So regulations, yes, they will have a role to play. Structured financing options, that is another element. But the third element is if we can look at different situations and bring out one single solution that can help us out in terms of cascading our outputs. So that is something which can well be looked at. And this will help us out in terms of our own disclosures, our own stewardship. We can become the torch bearers. And obviously, sooner or later, I would expect that the way we have done the agreement with Japanese government, we will soon have, say, for example, closure of discussions which is happening with the European Union. The large trade deal has already happened. We are looking at other elements also to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. I think let me first compliment all my panelists for sticking to time, and we have a little over 8 minutes still remaining. And let me see how many. So there are a couple of questions. Anybody? 3 questions I can see. So let's, in this round, take all 3 questions first, and then I'll request the panelists to respond.
Hello, sir. I'm Dr. Jagdish Shivahare, professor and ex-scientist ISRO. Sir, my question, how is the implement strategy of carbon finance for clean technologies in India different than global in terms of financial viability, market barriers, and regional disparities?
I hope you have understood. Panelists, have you heard the question right? I also could not. So is it possible to maybe come here and ask your questions? Can I request all 3 people who want? No, it's not. There's too much of echo and it's impossible to.
Okay, sir. Sir, my question, how is the implement strategy of carbon finance for clean technologies in India different than global in terms of financial viability, market barriers and regional disparities.
Okay, now is it clear to everyone? Who wants to take this question? Alistair? It's very difficult to hear. No, can you just speak in the mic so that everybody else can? Yeah.
Sir, I'm Dr. Jagdish Shivhare, professor and ex-scientist ISRO. Sir, my question, how is the implement strategy of carbon finance for clean technologies in India different than global in terms of financial viability, market barriers, and regional disparities?
Who wants to, panelist, who wants to take this up?
Then come here.
No, it's okay. No. Indrajit?
No, even I would not have the right answer because this is exactly what we are deliberating here as to what kind of structure will work, and we are practically talking about various structures that have been practiced and the learnings which are very much there. So as part of this whole quorum wherein we have carried out the discussions, what we are suggesting is, or we are trying to converge to a thought is that not a single style of financing may work. We have to look at different kind of approaches. So we are looking at blended finance, we are looking at support from the government in terms of fixing the base price for carbon commodity. I have talked about, say, for example, in-setting, wherein I have absolute control because I practically buy raw material from my supply chain. So if there are opportunities of decarbonization of my supply chain, if I am selling steel in the international market, it is not necessary that I go with a gate-to-gate approach and say that these are the emissions per ton of steel that I am producing is happening from within my four walls, but I am decarbonizing right from the ore extraction till the final goods are being produced. Right? So there are different kinds of structure that we are trying to look at, and for different kinds of sectors, these opportunities of financing will have a different role to play. Somewhere it is required to bring down the cost of implementation. Somewhere wherein the cost of implementation may not be the case, we are looking at the ring fencing of the outputs so that if we are looking at green bonds or sustainability linked bonds, we are able to manage the payouts from the confined set of investments and returns rather than taking it on the books of the organization. So we haven't said that this structure will work. We are simply deliberating as to what may work, what may be required.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deepak Gupta from Merman Climate Finance. Since morning in the panels we've been hearing
Excuse
whether
me.
it was...
Can you please use this mic because again there's a lot of people. If you can just stay here.
Sure, is this better? Okay, I'm Deepak Gupta from Merman Climate Finance. Since morning in the panels we've heard whether it was about the building and cooling panel or the agriculture related panel, that the big hurdle is the small fragmented segment. If I'm a small builder, look at it from their perspective. If I'm doing a small building construction, then first I have to understand the methodology for availing carbon markets-based carbon finance. Then I have to absorb the cost of MRV. I have to form a sort of a coalition, and then at the end of it, I might get a 4 to 5% delta in my whole cost of project. It's not the Kochi airport which is consuming 20 lakh air conditioners. It's the small fragmented consumers who are. So, this is the big hurdle, and the solution invariably that I've heard is to wait for some magical aggregator to come in and solve for all of these hurdles. Why don't we instead look at some of the other things which have worked in India, for example, automatic approval route. Just take the data from the, discoms or the utilities about the net metering approvals for the buildings that have come up, for the, LC3 cement, which has been used from the GST portals, or any, green building material which has been used, which has been sold, and just do a direct benefit transfer of whatever the carbon markets are willing to pay for that kind of a, green project. That is one part of the question. The other one is about the compliance thing, which has also worked in India. Again, just like, automatic approval and direct benefit transfer. The other thing which has worked is every builder has to go in for an occupancy certificate. So why can't we give a score to the building or a small factory which has been set up automatically at the time of occupancy certificate, and again on the basis of the score pass on some direct benefit to them, and ultimately in time to come not give the occupancy certificate for certain builders who are not complying to those green building materials or green norms. So that's my question. Why haven't been thought?
Who wants to take up? Please.
I think you mentioned all the elements I am involved in, LC3 cement and the cooling and the buildings, because I was there in the morning session there. I think somehow you are answering to the previous questions. The local context understanding is very, very important here. And that is what I tried to reflect actually for his question, to bundle and how to bundle. And that's what I indicated in the beginning. As part of the international cooperation, we need to look at where things have worked, in which country, under which context, how we can bring that knowledge, know-how to the Indian context, understand actually a bit of customization so that it becomes a workable model. And that is how we do. Even in case of LC3, it was sort of developed in Cuba. You won't even imagine a small country developed that cement, but it doesn't make any impact there. So why we decided to bring in India, being a second largest cement producing country, with a lot of, the raw material around, different types of raw material there. So we learned actually what the research which was conducted there. And similarly, I would answer your question that we need to study. We don't have the answer at this moment, I think. We are collecting information here. What works actually in other countries there, how we can rope in the information, knowledge here in our context there. That's what actually I can answer.
Thank you. I think we have completely run out of time. Maybe you can in the tea break, you can do this. So let me once again thank all my panelists for wonderful interventions. Everybody who stayed on, a very big round of applause, and I'll hand it back to BE.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists for their great insights. Can I request Mr. Siddharth to please join us here and kindly felicitate all our esteemed panelists here on the stage, starting with our esteemed chair and moderator, Mr. Saurabh Kumar. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for great moderation. Mr. Anand Shukla. Mr. Sachin Kumar. Mr. Alistair Ritchie. Mr. Indrajit Singh. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together louder for all our esteemed panelists for sharing their wealth of knowledge and expertise with us. Can I request you to please come together for a quick photo opportunity? We can keep the bags at the chairs. Thank you. Yeah. You can keep it on the chair. Please step forward. Yes. May I request you to please step forward a little bit? Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you once again to all the panelists. Thank you so much. All right, so with this, ladies and gentlemen, we now proceed towards the last panel discussion for Prakriti 2026. Last but not the least, we have a very fascinating topic, that is strategizing corporate climate action, leveraging high-integrity carbon credits for global compliance. So this session is designed to provide some really great insights, practical and strategic framework for integrating high integrity carbon credits into corporate climate action. And it will also explore how organizations can prioritize deep decarbonization while carefully selecting and verifying credible carbon credits. The session will emphasize transparent reporting and claims risk management and contributing to the development of robust carbon markets. Through detailed operational steps, real-world examples, and actionable tools, we all will gain the knowledge needed to implement a net zero strategy that is not only credible and impactful, but also socially responsible, aligning environmental goals with corporate strategy. So may I request everyone, ladies and gentlemen, to please take your seats. Everybody, please be seated and kindly join me in welcoming on stage our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our chair and moderator for this session, Mr. Axel Michaelova, Research Director, Perspectives Climate Research. Welcome to you, sir. Mr. Rohit Kumar, Secretary, Carbon Market Association of India. Ms. Zarin Osho, Director of India Program, IGST. Ms. Apurva Mitra, Partner KPMG, and Mr. Vikash Ranjan, CEO, Pledge for Earth. Can I request you all to kindly join us here on this stage and take your seats at the dais? Yeah, it's already there, sir. And you can see it here and the...
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really happy that the final session of this two-day conference discusses high integrity, because very often carbon markets are discussed like markets for oil, markets for any other commodity, but they are different. And in 30 years of history of carbon markets, they failed several times because the integrity was not there. So I really commend the organizers that they have focused on high integrity as critical ingredient of carbon market success. And of course, why do we need high integrity? We need it because the countries, they have set their national commitments for greenhouse gas mitigation enshrined in the NDCs under the Paris Agreement. But we know that it's difficult to actually implement and enforce policies. We've discussed it throughout these days, for example, PET, REX, nice policies, but not always a fully successful outcome. And that's why we will have a so-called action gap. And this action gap, to actually reach the national target, needs company action. And then we have a further huge gap, the ambition gap, the difference between the NDCs and the 1.5 degree pathways that we want to achieve with the Paris Agreement. And again, this ambition gap can be closed by corporate action. That's why the corporate action is critical, and carbon credits are a key tool for closing these two gaps. But of course it means that the companies need to decide how to engage in the carbon credit market. And they of course can first engage domestically within their value chain to reduce emissions or remove, and then they can do action beyond that value chain to contribute to close the two gaps that I have outlined. And of course, at the very end, when whole countries are carbon neutral, then of course the private sector also needs to engage in removals, because at that point in time, emission reductions will no longer be sufficient. That now brings me to the key topic of this session. What are key ingredients for high integrity? The first and foremost is additionality. Any activity that is business as usual, that is attractive without the revenue from the carbon credits, cannot be part of carbon markets. And we have learned this the hard way. The CDM has failed because the additionality was doubtful, and big chunks of the voluntary carbon market have failed because additionality was doubtful. Then robust quantification. Throughout today, we have discussed MRV, how the MRV can be robust, how digital approaches can improve the MRV, and this, of course, is critical. And what is also critical, that the baseline from which the amount of carbon credits is calculated is conservative and will decline over time. Non-permanence of removals. That is a critical issue that is currently often forgotten when we discuss the potential for removals, and this is currently a hot topic in the international debate. Safeguards for the community. The agricultural session has discussed in detail what is needed to bring in the farmers, that they can get real benefits. And I think this discussion is not only relevant for the agricultural sector, it is relevant for all the sectors. Independent third-party assessment. We need to ensure that there is real verification and that there's no collusion. And this has been a problem that has been plagued the carbon markets many times. There have been a lot of scandals because the auditors were not really independent. And last but not least, avoidance of double counting. We can't sell the same credit twice, or we can't claim it twice. We need to ensure that there is a full, transparent registration, because otherwise, so all this needs to be fulfilled at the same time. And this, of course, is a tall order. Here you see a few headlines from international media that came across the voluntary carbon market in the years 2022 and 2023. And these have been toxic. They have destroyed the market. Here you see on this graph how the prices for voluntary credits have been falling from 2022 onwards. They declined by 90% in these 3 years, and this was clearly linked to the scandals that we've seen. Now, of course, we have Article 6 coming up, and Article 6 is giving a lot of hope for the international carbon market. But what is critical is that governments can make credits under the Article 6.2 directly from the voluntary private programs like VERA, like Global Carbon Council, and so on. And there the governments need to be careful. We are seeing in many countries in Africa rubber stamping of bad credits under Article 6.2. As I said in the morning session, fortunately India has good criteria for Article 6.2 and 6.4, but other countries do not, so there is a risk. So, of course, that now leads me to the last part of the introduction, the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism under Article 6.4. This is now a really revolutionary mechanism because it has improved massively on key concepts that are relevant for high integrity. It has strengthened the additionality testing, so for the first time I'm hopeful that additionality will no longer create scandals under Article 6.4. It has specified that the baselines need to be below business as usual and fully take into account policies that have been enacted. It encourages ambition over time by reducing the baseline emissions factor over the years. So eventually you can no longer generate credits from emission reductions around 2050, 2060 anymore. It has full alignment with the national policies. It wants to avoid lock-in of fossil fuels, and it also states that there needs to be an equitable sharing of benefits. And we've heard in the agricultural session how important that is. Finally, it wants to ensure permanence and cover the reversals of carbon stores. This is still under discussion and development, but it goes into the right direction. So this brings me to the conclusion that the Article 6.4 mechanism, the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, will become the benchmarks for the voluntary carbon markets in terms of integrity, and that the governments will use this. So that now brings me to the panel, and I'm really happy that we have a balanced panel, full female participation. First, we have Mrs. Sarin Osho, who's the director of the India program at the IGSD, who has been working a lot on the non-CO2 gases and disaggregated inventories of those. And given that too often the focus is on CO2, this perspective is very important. Then we have Mr. Rohit Kumar, who is Secretary General of the Carbon Market Association of India. I have been founder of the Zurich Carbon Market Association 15 years ago. So these associations play a key role, and of course I'm looking forward to hear the perspective of the Indian Carbon Market Association. Then we have Mrs. Apurva Mitra, long-standing expert on carbon markets at KPMG and co-chair of the Indian chapter of the International Emission Trading Association, and also having worked on the technical advisory board of the Science-Based Target Initiative, which is a critical private sector initiative involving demand for carbon credits. And last but not least, Mr. Vikash Ranjan, who is now here the representative of civil society, Pledge for Earth, with a long history of working for various institutions, both government and also international cooperation. So, without further ado, I will get into the question round, because time is running. So my first question to Zarin would be, how can high-integrity carbon credits complement near-term mitigation efforts, and how can they address the short-lived climate pollutants you have been working on so much?
Thank you, Axel, and thank you, Prakriti, for having me. One of the things that you were talking about in your presentation, Axel, was about additionality as a concept. In fact, one of the things that a lot of the panels have discussed over the last couple of days or so has been about additionality, about using carbon markets as an additional source of revenue for actual change on ground. How do we mitigate, how do we use this additional stream of money to perhaps fast-track climate action? And one of the things that I do want to highlight is that in the current market system, not just in India, but anywhere in the world, we are essentially using a single metric of calculations. We're benchmarking everything to GWP 100 because carbon dioxide is the largest greenhouse gas. Now, while we do that for economic benchmarking, and while that may make economic sense, it does not necessarily make sense in terms of loss of revenue, which is about 35%. And it also does not make sense from a climate mitigation standpoint, because essentially, in simpler terms, you're overestimating the mitigation that we are currently undertaking. So this means that the current system of a static multiplier in the market is not accurate scientifically, and is also not necessarily the one that is the more efficient one in terms of financial revenue generation for companies. Now, we are in a stage that then begs the question, what is the solution? The solution is a simple one, simpler said than done, of course. But scientifically, to solve this problem, you do need a dynamic or a non-static multiplier in markets. This allows for us to then consider trading non-carbon dioxide gases like methane, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide. At some point, even air pollutants in the market. You have the United States of America, the sulfur acid rain program, and you have so many other programs. EPIC does one in Gujarat, for instance. These markets then do have the ability to not only generate additional revenue for the participating industries, but also have the ability to have a real impact on climate. And one of the things that I do want to mention here is this discussion on non-CO2 comes at a very critical juncture in time. And I say this because the Europeans are now ready to roll out the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the CBAM. Obviously, the countries like mine here in India are going to be left a little uncertain about the market signals because fungibility is yet to be discovered. We are still figuring out with the Europeans, I'm sure everybody in the global south that are suppliers to the European Union are still in the process of figuring out what does that fungibility look like. So from an industry standpoint, having clarity on all gases brings in value in the market. It also helps make sure that the government or the negotiations that are looking at adopting an alternative methodology for trading, which allows for dynamic trading in the market, is able to price climate action more efficiently. And even from a climate mitigation standpoint, we're essentially looking at a possibility of doing accurate measurements of mitigation rather than one that is notional in the current GWP system. So I think for those reasons, SLCPs and how to trade them, or short-lived climate pollutants and how to trade them in the current mechanism then becomes extremely important because these are the gaps that it fills.
Thank you very much. And of course, there's a lot of scientific debates about replacement of the current GWP by, for example, temperature potentials. So this is definitely a very important issue. Rohit, now you as Secretary General of the Indian Carbon Market Association, of course, have a good overview of the ecosystem, and Indian entities have been leading in supplying credits under the CDM, but the quality of the credits was often contested. So how could Indian carbon market developers change this in the context of Article 6 and put themselves on the high end of the quality?
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to congratulate B for launching an Indian carbon market, because we are working with B from last more than 3 years, and we are trying to give more inputs from the industry point of view. So I would like to say that in this forum that now the market is really shaping in the right direction, and the corporate can really add climate finance in their business plan. I'm sure that it can happen from the coming years. Right now, corporates are not adding climate finance revenue in the business plan because of uncertainty that what the price of the credit will be. So we are leading towards the right direction right now. And at the same time, I'd like to highlight that India has a great learning knowledge in the carbon market. We have 20 years plus experience in this market. So the steps we have taken ahead, I'm sure that we have taken all those knowledge and learning so that the Indian carbon market portal has been launched, and we are taking ahead with the industry together. And I'm also glad to say that Indian industry has already taken proactive initiatives. And I also would like to congratulate Indian industry for taking all the corporate actions to mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions. And most of them, the business plan is focused on how they can reduce the emission and be the competitive in the coming world in the era of CBAM and in the era of where the climate environmental rules and regulation is going to decide the business in coming decades. And so first of all, CDM era, the question is that in the CDM, we are already a leader as an Indian carbon market. We have 15 to 20% projects where belong to the India in the CDM market. And as a country, we have generated more than $10 billion. So that leadership and knowledge and learning as a country we have. And now we definitely wish to replicate in the Article 6 market. And Article 6 market is also shaping, as we know that, 6.2 and 6.4. And most of the panelists in the earlier session has discussed about how we have signed up with Japan. Now we are leading towards Korea, Sweden, Singapore, and even some discussions are on with Germany, as per my knowledge. But at the same time, I also wish to highlight that all these things need to be speed up well, because We have seen this 13 technology or 14 technology from last so many years, but not a single project has been listed and registered so far. So industry is really wish to work together. Industry really wish to join hand together, but we need to speed up all the discussions which are happening in the Article 6. I met so many Japanese counterparts recently. Most of them had discussed that they're ready to join Indian counterpart. So we have a great market ready, and we wish to join hand. In the meantime, as you mentioned that, I think there's a myth that Indian carbon credit in the CDM is facing challenge and all. Because when we talk about any projects, the quality of projects, we can define that the quality of projects is good or bad, but not as a country yet. India has already done tremendous projects earlier, generated enough credit for the world, while few projects might get some integrity issues. But as a country, as an industry, we have done so many projects successfully. That's why we are able to trade $10 billion credit for us. And while the Indian carbon credit market, in terms of Article 6.2, I think there are certain pillars I have noted down, and those pillars are really important for any carbon credit market, not only for Article 6 or 6.2 or 6.4. The pillars are like, as he mentioned about additionality, that is the area where everybody is focusing right now. And also the robust global accepted methodology. I think that will definitely be qualified in case we are going for Article 6 market. And even we were qualifying in the CDM era. And transparency and monitoring is another area, and reporting verification, and of course blockchain and AI integration is there, and our large number of members are already working in this space. They're integrating the project so that there should not be any gap in terms of monitoring and creating concern about the integrity, quality, and standard, and all these terminologies are well discussed in the earlier sessions. So what I think as a country, we are ready for giving the best carbon projects in the world. And that's why the world is buying credits from India right now. And we also would like to mention that there need to be an elimination of the double counting, which is obvious when we go for Article 6 and 6 projects. And finally, we also wish to communicate that Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is totally aligned with the international standards, goal and parameter. And I'm sure that when our projects is going to be listed and registered, those projects will definitely going to get a best projects, best quality and standard in the world. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now, Apurva, you of course work with a lot of corporate clients. How do you see the demand of these corporate clients for high integrity credits? Are they seriously interested, or do they still look for the biggest quantity to get it most cheaply?
If I were to look at broader trends, and just start with volumes maybe, if you look globally, right, the overall volume of trade hasn't really risen to the, what the expectations we had. We have seen highs and lows over the last couple of years. I think number of different reasons. One being that greenwashing concerns are quite central today. There's a lot of scrutiny on, the corporate sector in terms of the commitments they're making, but how they're meeting those commitments. Companies are no longer using credits to meet their primary decarbonization needs. It's a means to offset their residual emissions. That's a very different approach from, say, 10, 20 years back when the offset market was really booming. So we've seen that demand kind of fall. Also, they're less interested in the legacy projects. So there is a huge pipeline of projects and credits that's available that are still from legacy projects that these corporates are not looking at buying, because they're much more concerned about vintage today than they were ever in the past. So a number of reasons why that volume overall has declined. But if you look at the value of trade, value of trade has still increased. It's been a slow recovery, but it has increased, right? And if you look at the third fact together with this, which is the average price of credits has been fairly consistent or dropped also at times, which just goes to show that the price of the so-called perceived high integrity credits has actually risen quite a lot. And so there's now a fairly big differential in terms of the value at which these high versus what the so-called perceived not as high on integrity projects are selling. So that gap has widened fairly wide over the last couple of years. Now, one reason, of course, is, like I said, number of reasons, but that risk is still there, something that's in the mind of the corporates. And for example, I also co-chair IITA's India chapter. IITA has been working with the Coalition to Grow Markets, for example, to come up with the right frameworks that can allow for the safe usage of credits for corporates, because this is a big fear that we have to allay. On the other hand, if you see forward sales are rising, again, because of this increasing demand for the high integrity credits, because people or the corporates want to secure the supply of these high integrity credits. So while there's a huge generation of credits which are not perceived as such, for which demand is low, there's these high integrity credits, which typically you can talk about nature-based solutions or even engineered solutions around direct air capture, CCUS and others, where the supply is fairly low and the demand is very high, right? So this price differential has evolved over time. I think another big trend is just the compliance markets. So if you look at the domestic compliance markets that are coming up across the world, at least 40% of them have some fungibility with credits, so they allow for some usage of credits. So that's another space where this could be rising. If you see the Corsia market, if you look at where this demand for high integrity credits is coming, it's today it's tech companies, it's aviation sector. It's a Corsia that's coming up that's also kind of leading to a lot of speculation on what that, how that demand may rise. So a lot of forward sales are happening in that direction as well. So a number of these compliance-based systems are also kind of egging the system on and leading to this demand over long. Article 6 is also, as you know, it's been slow in its uptake that way. Like I think what we expected was a much faster uptake, but it's also a lot that has to be done at the host country level to be able to enable that. Where, again, I think now a lot of new bilateral agreements are being signed, a lot of projects are being invested in. So it's been slow in its uptake, but we can see it gathering momentum. So I think a lot of these, if you look at all of these trends together, there is a definite movement to greater integrity credits, which we can't ignore. And if you look at, you talked about SBTIs, that's something that I've been part of for a very long time as well, the working group. A lot of these disclosure frameworks are also building in credits in different ways, where again they're emphasizing the use of high integrity credits. So the demand is definitely on the rise for high integrity credits. I wouldn't say the same for the larger ecosystem more broadly.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This is fully in line with what I'm seeing. Also, the difference between low quality stuff that can sometimes not be sold at all and the high quality stuff that generates really high prices, especially, for example, in the removal space. I fully concur with your observations. Now, Vikash, we have seen Indian civil society organizations criticizing voluntary carbon market activities heavily for not generating benefits for local communities. So what would you see as, for example, government engagement to prevent this? And do you think that the Article 6 could be a good way to overcome the problems that the civil society organizations have flagged with carbon markets in the past?
Thank you, Axel. Thank you for the question, and thank you, B, for inviting me in the panel itself. Look, what is happening, the CSOs are basically not criticizing the VCM. They are supporting, in fact. Yes, in some angle, with respect to some agri-products or some agricultural systems where lots of things yet to be done, and there they need something which proved to be a good part in terms of carbon markets. So Article 6 brings maximum things into it, and of course VCMs and the compulsory markets both are designed under Article 6. They are not beyond Article 6 or before Article 6. There are lots of things that needs to be done over there as well. What is interesting to note that we has given the targets for around 500 industries, right? This has to be expanded at more sectors, like the smaller one as well. Now, they have notified 15 more sectors which could be included under perform, achieve, and trade. But at the same time, they must be inclusions in the carbon market as well, because this needs to be expanded. Now, why this should be expanded? Because you need many things which could change in the technology part with respect to carbon emissions as well in all the sectors. But at the same time, if you go down towards the MSMEs where lots of jobs are still lying, right? And they are not compatible enough to go with high-end carbon accounting systems. So those angles needs to be covered as well in carbon market with respect to Article 6, what is it talked about. Now, if you take MSME in place, and there are lots of industries which will come in terms of offset markets. Now, coming to the offset markets as well, where lots of projects can be given to MSMEs, or they are basically pointing out all these projects into their systems. So basically, they are not having that capabilities. So we need to emphasize all these things into the smaller markets as well, where we can bring some more players into the car market, and therein we can have more buy-in as well in terms of technologies, smaller technologies, or the ideas which can have many more things into the car market itself. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now I would like to walk backwards, starting with Rohit and running down the panelists to me with one very short sentence. What should be the most important action by a player in the carbon market ecosystem, be it government, private sector, or international partners, to unlock high integrity carbon credits? Rohit, starting with you and then running down.
Sorry.
One single most important action to scale high integrity credit by government or private sector or other partners.
You're starting with Rohit or
Yeah, you
Vikash?
start and
Vikash.
then...
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
Sorry. Vikash, please,
Fine. So, if I take one sentence, it will be MRV with a transparent way, right? MRV is a backbone to the complete processes of implementations with respect to carbon market as well. So transparency is the main approach, and without the transparency we cannot go ahead with this. Otherwise, the market will be flooded with the certificates, and you won't be getting anything.
Thank you, Apurva.
I think India has to move fairly fast if it wants to position itself as a supplier or the leading supplier of high integrity credits in the world. And for that, we have to be very well aware of exactly what kind of projects, technologies, methodologies are actually what buyers are looking for and that fetch the right prices, so we're able to build the right pipelines. At the same time, we have to ensure that policy signals are consistent and stable. And that we don't change, methodologies, rules, and too fast, so that investors also have the right stable policy signals to invest in long-term projects, which I think is something that we need right now.
Thanks a lot, Rohit.
Yeah. So my observation is that since we already have a compliance market, Article 6 market, and the voluntary carbon market, we have so many opportunities ahead. But when we see the industry point of view, industry is really concerned to initiate a project in the stage 1 itself, and where I think government role is very important to join hand together, do some PPP model project, develop project together, understand that what is the spend in terms of R&D, any R&D of the project investment from the government side, it should be must in this stage right now. Then it will really give a trust to the carbon market about the quality standards and integrity. So role of government and the private sector joining hand is the most important area. And we have multiple schemes, and as a National Green Hydrogen Mission, we are also coming with a SAF mandate, where government is giving the SAF mandate to by 2026, 1% blending to the aircraft. So there's various schemes like Jal Jeevan Mission we have, and PM Kusum Yojana we have. So where PPP model possibility, additionality possibilities are there. So I think the government and industry collaboration is the most important area. Second, I want to really address in this forum.
One sentence, sorry.
Yeah, I'll quickly, 1 minute I'll take, that we have more than 200 million credits left. So in which 100 million credits are from the CDM credits and 100 million are voluntary credits. So we should also understand that what is the future of the credit, because industry has really taken effort, and industry has done large investment. So those credit futures should also be decided. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarin, please.
I think, Axel, my answer is going to be that India is at the precipice of climate leadership. We are one of the few countries in the world that has upgraded our nationally determined contribution targets under the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. And the reason that we've done is because of the visionary leadership here in Delhi. And one of the things that I say we are at the precipice of being a global leader on climate change and climate action is because with the launch of the Indian carbon markets, we are currently trading long-lived gases, PF6 and CO2. This is a great chance for us to also start including non-CO2 greenhouse gases, which then also signal, policy signals, as my co-panelists have alluded to industry and other countries for Article 6 trading, 6.4. You're also looking at ITMOS. So the inclusion of non-CO2, this is a great testing ground, starting with voluntary, moving to compliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've heard very diverse and enlightening perspectives on high-quality credits. So with that, I would like to thank you and give back to BE.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please have a big, big round of applause for all our esteemed panelists? And may I request Ms. Diksha Chauhan to kindly come on stage and kindly felicitate all the panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for a very comprehensive and an illuminating discussion we just had. Please give it up for our chair and moderator, Mr. Axel Michaelova, Research Director, Perspectives Climate Research. Please put your hands together for Ms. Zarin Osho, Director, India Program, IGST. Mr. Rohit Kumar, Secretary, Carbon Market Association of India. Ms. Apurva Mitra, Partner, KPMG. And Mr. Vikash Ranjan, CEO, Pledge for Earth. Thank you. Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing their perspectives. Can I request you to please come together for a quick group photograph? Right at the center. Fabulous. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big, big round of applause one more time. This was the last panel for the day, and thank you so much. We're indeed grateful that we could pull off so many key takeaways from this panel. And thank you so much, everybody, all the people who are still a part of this hall, people who are there at the back. You are requested to come a little forward because now we're proceeding towards the valedictory session, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you so much once again to all the panelists. Thank you. And thank you, yes, indeed, for concluding it within the time duration. Thank you. All right, so with this, ladies and gentlemen, after 2 complete days of knowledge, action, insights, so many great perspectives that have been brought here from all across the world, I would say indeed we had 2 completely action-packed, knowledge-packed days. And now we have come to the moment of conclusion where we are going to finally have our valedictory session on the stage, and what a great moment. Can I request you all to please take your seats now for the same? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, for the valedictory session, I would like to request Ms. Yashika Malik, Climate Change Specialist at World Bank, to please join us here on the stage. Welcome back to you. Please have a seat at the dais. Mr. Rajiv Ralhan, Partner, PwC. Mr. K.C. Panigrahi, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And Mr. Saurabh Didi, Director, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Two remarkable days filled with so many insights, so many different topics, and of course a very enriching discussion that has taken at this platform. We would now urge you to please join us here at the podium and kindly share your remarks with all of us. I would humbly request Ms. Yashika Malik, Climate Change Specialist, World Bank, to kindly address the gathering.
Good evening, everyone. Just few more minutes and you can go back to the remaining weekend that you have. But on behalf of the World Bank, I want to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, and Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change for organizing Prakriti 2nd edition 2026 and giving us a privilege of being a partner in this journey. To the Government of India, thank you for your continued ambition and leadership on carbon markets. The launch of Indian Carbon Market Portal alone marks a significant milestone, and it signals to the world that India is serious about building the infrastructure for a credible and high-integrity carbon market. Thank you to our partners, knowledge partners, every panelist, moderator, masterclass facilitator, who brought their expertise and candor to the discussions over the last 2 days, and to each one of you in this room, still remaining here with full enthusiasm for your engagement, your questions and deliberations. The quality of conversation at this conference has been exceptional, in this room and beyond, near the coffee areas as well. Over 2 days and 12 plenary sessions, there are few themes that have emerged, and I want to just share a few of them. That integrity is non-negotiable, whether it's from the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism to domestic compliance framework. Every conversation has focused on integrity. No sector can be left behind, though we are starting with certain sectors, but participation of other sectors is extremely important for achieving our climate and development goals both, and our North Star, which is jobs in some of the upcoming green sectors. And that it was encouraging to hear that the private sector is signaling that they're ready to participate, and they need the right signals from, say, the government and other partners to be fully committed to this engagement. And we also had some interesting session on farmers, which is close to my heart, that they want to be active beneficiaries, not active partners, not just a beneficiary. And let me close with a commitment that the World Bank Group across the bank, whether it's IFC, MEGA, is fully committed to working alongside the Government of India, state governments, and the private sector to make carbon markets work at scale. We bring financing, technical expertise, and global knowledge of what works and what doesn't work. We are here as a long-term partner, not just for the conference, but for the journey ahead. Whether it is supporting in operationalization of CCTS, building MRV capacities, bringing in private sector financing, and through frameworks that are globally acceptable. Carbon markets, it's not a silver bullet, but designed well with integrity, inclusion, and ambition, they can be a powerful engine for India's climate growth and livelihoods for millions of people. And Prakriti 2026 has shown us that where there is a will, there is a way forward. So World Bank Group stands ready to help turn this into action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malik. Can I request Mr. Rajiv Ralhan, partner PwC, to kindly deliver his valedictory address?
So thank you all. Thank you very much for this event. So I'll use this opportunity to thank Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Director General. Thank you, sir. Mr. Saurabh Didi for leading this whole initiative, Dr. Ashok Kumar. I think B's leadership has been key in helping organize this event. Let me also thank our teams who've been closely working with B on this initiative. While we were debating around, I could see a lot of interaction in last 2 days. While we were debating around what are the key things which we can take forward. We were discussing with Director General some time back. So 2 things or 3 things which definitely we see that will take it forward. One part could be that what are the key takeaways for all of us from this program? How can we improve it further when we move into Prakriti 3? What are the things maybe we need to do more? That's one takeaway from our side. The second thing, again, which is very critical here is that as we are talking about transforming the market, as we are talking about entities, private sector participating in our programs as we move forward, because that's key to success of our programs. How do we engage them more as we move forward? That is also one of the takeaways, that as we move forward in next level of programs, can we have a deeper interaction with the larger private sector players as well. So with this, I'll once again thank everybody, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, World Bank, for helping us organize this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ralhan. Can I now request Mr. K.C. Panigrahi, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, to kindly deliver his valedictory address. Ladies and gentlemen, with some applause, come on, let's welcome him here to the podium.
Distinguished guests, good evening. As we conclude this momentous gathering, I am filled with a lot of optimism for the path we are charting together. This event has highlighted the crucial role of a carbon market in India's sustainable development and just transition, and highlighted our collective determination to achieve a resilient economic future. And it also ensures that both GDP growth as well as sustainable development will go hand in hand. India's leadership in carbon market is not merely an aspiration. It is a defining element of our national strategy for sustainable development. And in terms of our global commitment for the net zero ambition of 2070, this will prepare a kind of roadmap and ensure that we achieve it. Prakriti 2026 was aimed at bringing together the policymakers, industry leaders, and experts to be in this journey together. We opened the proceedings of this 2-day event with the lamplighting, and during that time, our Secretary Minister of Power, Shri Pankaj Agrawal, highlighted the various energy efficiency efforts and initiatives that the ministry is taking through BE, as well as he emphasized that carbon markets are powerful instruments for the economic growth. The Minister of State of Power and Renewable Energy, Shripad Naik, in fact, highlighted the 3 C's, which is, that credibility through MRV, capital required for these kind of clean technologies, and collaborations with the international at the international level. One of the key highlights also, which was during this event, was the launch of a carbon market portal by our Honorable Union Minister of Power and Housing and Urban Affairs, Sri Manohar Lalji. I'm sure that this would bring a lot of discipline and trust and transparency of our system. That's what we are actually making. The Honorable Minister, Union Minister, highlighted India's leadership in advancing climate commitment under the visionary guidance of Prime Minister. India has demonstrated that climate responsibility and economic developments can go hand in hand. Through initiatives such as a carbon credit trading scheme, renewable energy expansion, and energy efficiency programs, India is building a transparent and credible carbon market framework that will serve as a long-term national asset. As an administrator of the carbon market, Bureau of Energy Efficiency would continue to provide and lead all the regulatory framework, and also would ensure that all the rocks from the soup will be eliminated so that we continue in this marathon and in this journey. Looking at our vision is ambitious. We aim to expand the compliance framework across various sectors, strengthen the offset mechanism, and leverage cutting-edge technologies to ensure our market remains at the forefront of global best practices. The choices we make today will shape the world for tomorrow. This is our moment to act, to resolve, and create a future where economic growth and environmental stewardship go hand in hand. With collective ambition and innovative thinking, we can ensure that India not only meets its climate goal, but also emerges as a global leader in the carbon market. Today, we had a very engaging fireside chat by Sri Gaur Gopal Das ji, with the key takeaways being take what you need, restore what you use, and protect what you cannot restore. And indeed, it is, that there are certain things which are reversible, there are certain things which are irreversible, and we must take care of those what is irreversible. Thank you all for your active participation and dedication. Together, let us build a future that is sustainable, resilient, and prosperous for generations to come. From my side, be safe. Wish you a safe travel back. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Panigrahi. Can I now request Mr. Saurabh Didi, Director, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, to kindly address the gathering.
So, thank you. I have a long list to the person I have to say thank you for organizing this event. So I will take at least 1 hour. So first of all, thank you to Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, who actually helped us, guided us, and in organizing this event. Also to Ashok Kumarji, DDGBE, who actually pitched in everywhere, wherever we needed him. He came, okay, I will do this. So thanks a lot, sir. Then my team, Mandeep, Meenakshi, who actually coordinated everything. They looked after everything and supported us. Media team, Ajay Tripathi, Anil Sharma, Ashima, I don't know if I am missing some names, but convey my thanks to them as well. Then from directors, like there are few activities which we even don't know, like bringing Honorable Minister here. So for example, Khandareji looked after that area. So Khandareji, Colonel Banyal, N. Mohan, Sham, all those people actually helped us in those things. Like Negi, Vivek Negi, Ravi Prajapati, all those people. Then PMU, PricewaterhouseCoopers, like Rajiv under his team, Tushar, Shiv, I don't know where he is. He mailed everyone, at least 2,000 mails he sent. And I don't know, he was taking care of everyone. Pankaj, who developed our comic. Sudhan was involved. Anjan, where is Anjan? Who, all those, the things which are written here, he was checking and ensuring that right speaker is in right place. Pramod, Shreyasi, Salva, who actually developed our website. Then from P4E, the Vikasji, under Vikasji's guidance, I don't know where he is. Under his guidance, Charu, Gunjan and Ruhina, with whom I actually fought as well. That, okay, these things have to happen very quickly. Then Yashika, World Bank, Ritu, all those people actually helped us in getting people from various parts of our country, world actually. Then EDF. EDF, Shuchi, Pedro, they helped us in actually organizing at least 4 sessions and discussing with all the speakers and everybody. Then media team, Juhi, Komal and her team, they actually were sending us text, WhatsApp messages till 3 o'clock in the night. And these, all those things which you are seeing here actually developed by them. Then GIZ, who helped us in organizing Siddharth, Nikhil, Nitin, UNEP, Benjamin, Aarti, BHC, Sanyukta, Archana, UNFCC, Uma, Perumal, Diksha. One of the, where is Diksha? Diksha is our last minute support. Actually, she helped us in earlier 2025 Prakriti, and she volunteered herself that I will do this time as well. Then reporters, we don't know the things which we are saying and which this booklet will also come out. They developed, they are going to develop actually, finalize. Ishita, Shubham, Ashi, Ashutosh, where are they? There they are. Then Nihit and his team, late night, they were doing everything. If you are seeing everything here, it is only because of Nihit and his team. Then last but not least, if I have not missed anyone, but yes, last but not least, I would like to call Mandeep and Meenakshi to come on stage to actually felicitate Namrata. She is actually taking care of everyone right from day one. And she was involved in the earlier Prakriti as well. So, then thanks to Yashobhumi as well, who gave us such a beautiful venue. And we have a lot of team, like in Yashobhumi also there are different teams. So thanks to everyone. Then last but not least, all the speakers and the delegates who actually came and the people who are here as well. Thank you to everyone for joining here and making this Prakriti 2026 a success, and looking forward for more such Prakriti sessions in future. Thank you. And if I missed anyone, please excuse me for that.
All right, so with this, thank you so much, sir. And I would like to thank all the dignitaries on the dais. Can I request you to please come together for a quick photo opportunity as well? May I request you all to please come together for a quick photo opportunity as well on the stage? Yeah. Superb. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, since we have come to the closure of Prakriti 2026, I think it makes sense that we etch these memories, etch these moments, and so that we can cherish it later. I believe now is the time where we should take some photographs as well. So everybody who is a part of Prakriti 2026 and has been here right from the beginning till now, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Can we have a big round of applause for you all? Thank you. All the knowledge that has been shared and your participation, your enthusiastic participation, I would say, is truly commendable. Can I request everyone who is present in the room right now to please join us here on the stage so that we can mark these moments in our memories forever. Let's take just some pictures here. Everybody is requested to please join us here on the stage and let's take some photographs. And I think for the people who are currently present here, we have some ample space on the stage. Some of you can join us here. Some of us can be on the stairs. Some of us can line up on the floor as well. Please find a spot for yourself in the frame. Wherever you want to stand, make yourselves comfortable here on the stage. All right, please do listen to the photographer. He's sharing some good spots for all of you to be visible. I hope everyone is visible in the frame. Just in case if somebody is feeling they're not, kindly find a good spot for yourself. There is no one behind him, by the way. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's take 3 pictures, okay? First, both the hands down, give a good smile to the camera. Both